Hey there, and welcome to Weeb Novel Audiobook, your hub for epic fanfics, original stories, and thrilling adventures brought to life. Make sure to subscribe for regular updates and swing by my Patreon for early access and exclusive mature content. Now, sit back and enjoy the journey.
Chapter 40, Kyojuro wasn't home ________________________ so, this is where we part ways, huh. At the fork in the road leading in two different directions, Iori and Takeo stood side by side, both feeling a bit sentimental. It had been 3 days since the final selection ended. Because they were tired, they had stayed an extra day before heading back. Now, Takeo was returning to the Rengoku estate, to report to Kyojuro that he had passed the selection. Iori, meanwhile, was going to report back to her cultivator, her grandfather, and share the good news that she had officially become a demon slayer. In half a month or maybe a full month, once their custom Nichiren swords were finished, they'd begin receiving missions. But since their destinations were different, this was where the two of them had to part. Iori was clearly reluctant. "You better write to me, brat. Who knows how long it'll be before we meet again after this." She ruffled Takeo's slightly long red hair, giving him repeated reminders. Takeo stared at her deadpan, letting her mess up his hair while silently reflecting, have I been too nice to this woman lately? She's getting bolder by the day. Maybe I should punch her before we say goodbye. If you want me to write to you, shouldn't you give me your address first? Takeo said as he slapped Iori's hand away. Iori froze for a second, then smacked her fist into her palm in realization. "Oh, right. Hang on, I'll write it down for you." She turned around, pulled out pen and paper from her pack, and started jotting down her address. While writing, she asked casually, "By the way, where are you staying now?" "Tokyo Prefecture, Ibara District. At the Rengoku Estate." "Oh, Tokyo Prefecture, Ibara District. Wait. What?" She stopped mid-sentence. A second later, she spun around and grabbed Takeo by the shoulders, shouting, "What did you just say? Rengoku Estate? Isn't that where the current Flame Hashira lives? What's your relationship with the Flame Hashira?" "I didn't mention it. Kyojuro-san told me that if I passed the final selection, he'd take me in as his foster son." "You definitely did not mention that. You didn't ask though, Haya. Becoming a Hashirist Tsugyuko? That basically guarantees you'll be the next Flame Hashira as long as you survive. That's insanely unfair. I'm so jealous I could scream." Iori shook Takeo's shoulders wildly, her envy and disbelief practically bursting into the sky. From the very beginning, Iori had dreamed of being trained by a Hashira. Even a retired one would have been fine. With that kind of mentorship, she might have had a shot at becoming a Hashira herself one day. In the end, the one who had trained Iori wasn't even a former Hashira, just an ordinary former swordsman. And now, this brat she'd casually run into turned out to be the foster son of the current Flame Hashira. The sheer jealousy radiating off Iori could practically be smelled in the air. It was that intense. Seeing her burning with envy, Takeo couldn't help but pat her shoulder and say, okay. No need to be jealous. I mean, if you became the Flame Hashirist Tsugyuko, I doubt you'd last 3 days. What was that? Are you looking down on me, brat?" Iori bared her teeth, flailing her arms. "It's not an insult. I'm just stating the truth. You've seen my recovery ability, right?" "I've seen it. So what?" "Well, even I need to lie down for a full night to recover after going through Kyojuro-san's training. And that's just a single session. Normally, that kind of training lasts 1 to 2 months straight." Takeo spoke earnestly, describing Rengoku Kyojuro's hellish training regimen in detail. Iori was stunned on the spot. She blinked slowly and asked, "Every day? Every day?" A heavy silence settled over the fork in the road. Iori and Takeo stared at each other for a long moment before she finally let go of his shoulders, stood up, and said with forced nonchalance, "You know what? I suddenly feel like my old cultivator grandpa isn't so bad after all. Being the Flame Hashira's foster kid, doesn't sound that appealing, actually." Although Iori had once claimed that if she ever had the chance to become a Hashira's disciple, she'd gladly endure any brutal training, well, that was then, and this is now. That kind of resolve only applied when the training wasn't going to kill her. And if Rengoku Kyojuro's training was something even this demon-like red-haired brat with crazy regeneration could barely withstand, then what chance did she, a normal person, have? Forget it. Maybe she really wasn't cut out to be a Hashira's foster child after all. With a conflicted heart and tears threatening to fall, Iori said her goodbyes to Takeo. Takeo gave her a small wave, the corners of his lips lifting into a slight smile. He hadn't exaggerated anything. Rengoku Kyojuro's training was truly more Spartan than Spartan itself. Every night after training, Takeo collapsed into bed the moment it was over, his body pushed to the absolute limit of its regenerative ability. But it was precisely because Kyojuro knew how strong Takeo's regeneration was that he set such an extreme training load several times greater than what a normal person could handle. If it had been a normal trainee, Kyojuro would have adjusted the regimen accordingly. So in truth, his training wasn't as terrifying as Iori imagined. Harsh, yes, but not impossible. But Takeo didn't bother explaining any of this to Iori, first, because there was no need to, and second, because he genuinely didn't believe Iori could endure Kyojuro's training. After all, Kyojuro Rengoku had taken in several Tsugyuko candidates over the years, and aside from Kenroji Mitsurai, none of them had lasted. Even Takeo himself, if not for the willpower inherited from old Man Logan, would have likely run off by now. That's why, if Iori really did go and ask the Flame Hashira to become his foster daughter, Kyojuro might say yes, but she definitely wouldn't last more than a few days. Rather than let her face that kind of disappointment, it was better not to say anything at all. Time to head back. Gripping his slightly damaged Nichiren sword, Takeo glanced up at the sky and began walking in the direction of the Rengoku estate. In this world, Takeo had never had a fixed home. He usually stayed wherever his feet took him. But now he had a place to return to. And that gave him a sense of belonging he hadn't felt before. He hadn't stayed long at the Rengoku household, but whether it was Kyojuro or Senjuro, he had a good impression of both. The only exception was that drunkard, Shinjuro Rengoku. Takeo really didn't like him. Still, since the old drunk rarely ever showed up at the training grounds, Takeo just pretended he didn't exist. All in all, the Rengoku estate could be considered Takeo's first real home in this world. So just thinking about going back put him in a pretty good mood. The journey back went smoothly, with no unexpected encounters, and by unexpected, he meant demons. Unlike last time, where he'd run into a demon while traveling, nothing of the sort happened this time. To be fair, that kind of encounter was rare. Demons generally didn't appear in heavily populated areas. They preferred to hide themselves, avoiding detection by the Demon Slayer Corps. For whatever reason, demons tended to operate alone. They didn't gather in groups. While a lone demon could easily kill one or two ordinary humans, if a crowd gathered, even the demon could be in danger. The exception, of course, was demons who possessed blood demon arts. But demons of that caliber were even better at hiding and even less likely to be found easily. Was that because of the orders given by the Demon King, Kibutsuji Musen? Takeo pondered idly as he traveled. The Demon King, Kibutsuji Musen, the original source of all demons. It was said he had lived for over 1,000 years, and that the Demon Slayer Corps had been entangled in a struggle with him for just as long. The Corps had been founded with one ultimate goal, to kill Musen. But Musen was a master of evasion. He was so powerful that not even a single Hashira stood a chance alone. and when multiple Hashira gathered, Muzan simply couldn't be found. And that was why the Demon Slayer Corps and Kibutsuji Muzan had remained locked in conflict for so long. But perhaps, that cycle would finally end with this generation. After all, the protagonist, Tanjiro Kamado, had already been born and probably holds a deep hatred towards demons. If anime and movie tropes held true, Tanjiro would eventually confront the Demon King and ultimately defeat him. Which meant, even if Takeo did nothing, he might still survive until the very end. But then, how many people would have to die in the meantime? An image of Kyojuro surfaced in Takeo's mind. Would he also fall in battle against Kibutsuji Muzan? Would someone that strong, really die at the hands of a demon? As he walked, lost in thought, Takeo continued refining his newly created wolf breathing, running through the forms in his mind. Eventually, he arrived safely back at the Rengoku estate. However, something caught him off guard. Kyojuro wasn't home. Chapter 41, Go ahead and draw the blade. Takeo-san, you're back. Did you pass the selection? As soon as Takeo returned, Senjuro came out to greet him. Takeo nodded and smiled at him, replying warmly, I passed. So I came straight back. Is Kyojuro-san home? My brother came back a few days ago, but he only stayed for a day before leaving again. He went on another mission? Was it a demon that required a Hashira to handle? Takeo looked at Senjuro in surprise. Of course, for a Hashira, they were either fighting demons or on the road to slay one. It wasn't unusual for them to be away from home. Still, it was rare for cases to arise that specifically required a Hashira's intervention unless there had been heavy losses among Demon Slayer members, or if a demon suspected to be one of the 12 Kazuki had appeared, and lower-rank Slayers couldn't handle it. Otherwise, Hashira usually had a bit more breathing room in their schedule. That breathing room was what made it possible for them to even consider training at Tsugyuko. That I don't really know, Senjuro said. Maybe it's a particularly elusive demon or something. Senjuro shook his head in response. As mentioned before, demons were excellent at hiding. If it were one of those with specialized concealment abilities, even sending regular demon slayers would likely lead to nothing. So it was reasonable for a Hashira to handle that kind of situation personally. Besides, while dealing with standard missions, Hashira were also constantly investigating any traces of the Demon King, and that kind of search took time. I see. Takeo said with a hint of disappointment. I was hoping to tell Kyojuro-san about the breathing style I developed. Wait, your own breathing style? You really pulled it off? Senjuro's eyes widened in shock. Takeo nodded. Yeah, I did. Though, the process was kind of messy. Just thinking about his newly created wolf breathing brought Muichiro Tokaido to mind. That guy had practically invented his own breathing style on his first day wielding a blade. Well, not really, and by the third day, he'd entered the final selection with terrifying strength. Takeo had only managed to beat him by relying on his extraordinary regeneration. But even so, now that a few more days had passed, Muichiro had probably grown even stronger. I'm never catching up to him at this rate, Takeo thought, unless I find a way to earn 2B's power. He sighed, even feeling a bit jealous of Muichiro's overwhelming talent. Meanwhile, Senjuro seemed to admire Takeo even more. You've really got amazing talent, Takeo. If I had even half of what you do, I'd probably already be a member of the Demon Slayer Corps by now. Then I could help my brother too. I know you mean well, but right now it kinda feels like you're mocking me. Takeo-san. I didn't mean it like that at all. Why would you think that? Senjuro flailed, waving his hands frantically in protest. Takeo stepped forward and gave his shoulder a pat. Don't worry about it. I'm just being petty. Senjuro didn't quite understand what Takeo meant. But setting aside Takeo's talent for now, something suddenly came to Senjiro's mind, and he quickly said, "Oh, right. Before my brother left, he said he had a gift for you. In case he didn't make it back in time, he asked me to give it to you instead. I'll go get it." "A gift?" Takeo watched Senjiro's retreating back with curiosity. Kyojuro had left him a gift? He wondered what kind it might be. With a mix of curiosity and anticipation, Takeo sat on the porch in front of the courtyard, sipping tea that Senjiro had brewed for him while waiting patiently. Before long, he saw Senjiro walking back toward him carrying a neatly folded piece of clothing in his arms. As Takeo rested, he set down his teacup and looked toward Senjiro, asking curiously, "This is?" "It's a haori my brother prepared for you," Senjiro explained as he unfolded the garment in front of him. When Mitsurai-Nisan passed her final selection, he gave her one just like this. The haori was a pure white completely unadorned, with no patterns or embellishments. Senjiro added that if Takeo ever decided he liked a certain color or symbol, he could have it sewn on later. Just like how the flame motif on Kyojuro's haori had been added by Kyojuro himself. Though the flame pattern was also part of the Rengoku family crest. Takeo took the haori, slipped it on, and gave a little spin in front of Senjiro. And sure enough, despite only having worn a simple brown kimono before, the addition of the haori made a visible difference. It transformed his entire presence. To put it bluntly, it was like he had gone from being a nameless background character to a full-fledged supporting cast member. He now had something uniquely his own. "The sleeves are kind of long, though," Takeo commented as he shook his arms, eyeing the fabric that extended past his wrists and the hem that nearly reached his ankles. "Feels a bit big." Senjiro explained, "My brother said you're still growing, so he had the haori made a little bigger on purpose." Takeo was currently around 12 years old, actually 11, and his body was still in the middle of a rapid growth phase. He would definitely grow taller in the months to come. Since Kyojuro, being the flame Hashira, couldn't always be at home, he wouldn't be around to replace or adjust Takeo's haori in real time. That's why he had it made a bit larger, so even if it couldn't be updated immediately, Takeo would still be able to wear it for at least a whole year. Understanding Kyojuro's intention, Takeo looked down at the haori and smiled. He turned to Senjiro and said, "I really like it. When Kyojuro-san returns, I'll thank him in person." "I'm glad to hear that," Senjiro replied with a smile. Then he added, "Oh, and one more thing, my brother said if you came back, you're welcome to use the training grounds anytime. Until your uniform and Nichiren sword are ready, you're free to stay here as long as you like. Also, he left behind a training plan for you. He asked me to supervise your progress." Senjiro went on to explain a lot more, especially detailing the training regimen that Kyojuro had carefully prepared for Takeo. The mention of a training plan made Takeo tense slightly. He was honestly a bit worried that Kyojuro had made it even more intense than before. But then he remembered that his regeneration had improved since the final selection, and that gave him a little peace of mind. Maybe it was because of his age, or maybe it was due to training in breathing techniques, but Takeo's recovery ability had clearly improved compared to when he had first received his inheritance. Even without actively using breathing to enhance his body, his natural regeneration speed was increasing, and it seemed to be improving bit by bit each day. Perhaps one day, Takeo wouldn't even need to activate his powers consciously. His wounds might just heal instantly on their own. He might even gain abilities identical to the peak Logan. But by that point, he'd probably be no different from a demon, huh? A demon who doesn't fear sunlight and doesn't eat humans. Actually, maybe he couldn't be called a demon at all. Still, if real demons ever found out about him, would they go mad with jealousy? Well, more importantly, it might also make Takeo a target. After all, a human who can regenerate indefinitely would be the perfect long-term food source. Shit. Don't think about it. Donning his haori, Takeo followed Kyojuro's training regimen each day. And just like that, over 20 days passed in a flash. During that time, Kyojuro never returned, but someone else did. The one who came to deliver Takeo's Nichiren sword. The swordsmith was an eccentric uncle wearing a flame-colored mask. The mask was honestly hilarious. Its mouth stuck out like it was trying to blow something, entirely painted red, with huge eyes and eyebrows so thick they were nearly the same size as the eyes. It might have been rude to think so, but Takeo genuinely found the mask ridiculously funny. Thankfully, Takeo didn't laugh out loud because he knew exactly who this man was. This was one of the swordsmiths of the Demon Slayer Corps. They were the ones responsible for forging the Nichiren swords used by demon slayers. It was no exaggeration to say that without them, even the strongest swordsmen in the Corps would be powerless against demons. They were deserving of respect. Takeo respectfully welcomed the swordsmith into the Rengoku estate. The man carefully set down the finished sword with great precision, then bowed politely and introduced himself. "I am Tetsuyodashi. From today forward, I will be the swordsmith responsible for forging swords for Kamado Takeo. Now, please, go ahead and draw the blade." The man who called himself Tetsuyodashi raised his head to look at Takeo, rubbing his hands together unconsciously. He looked even more excited than Takeo was about seeing the sword unveiled. ________________ 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3/Horny FBI Chapter 42, First official mission. Though he wasn't entirely sure why the swordsmith was so excited, Takeo still reached for the Nichiren sword that had been forged specifically for him, placing his hand on the hilt. At first glance, Takeo's sword looked fairly standard, not too long, not too short. But at his request, the tsuba, guard, had been crafted in the shape of wolf claws, featuring 3 sharp, slightly curved protrusions, with subtle fingers beneath them that mimicked a paw's shape. The hilt itself was a grayish-green, a color reminiscent of the wind. Gripping the hilt firmly, Takeo drew the blade in one smooth motion and held it upright in front of him to examine the edge. The silver-white blade gleamed coldly, exuding a sense of danger. It was obvious at a glance that this was an exceptionally sharp sword. Takeo was just about to praise the craftsmanship when something happened that made his eyes widen in shock. As he held the blade upright and focused on it, the color of the blade began to change visibly, right before his eyes. The entire blade shifted to a gray-green hue, while the cutting edge took on a pale, almost white-gray tone. In the blink of an eye, his Nichiren sword had changed color. Takeo stared in astonishment, but before he could say anything, Tetsuyodashi suddenly became frantic with excitement. "Gee, green. Why is it green? I thought it would be red. I mean your hair, your eyes, they're clearly red. You even look like one of the children of flame. So why is it green?" Tetsuyodashi-san. Seeing the swordsmith get so agitated he looked ready to explode, Takeo couldn't help but gently call out, trying to calm him down. Tetsuyodashi froze instantly, going stiff like a statue. A second later, he snapped back to normal and cleared his throat. "Ahem. My apologies, Kamado Takeo. That was rude of me." "It's fine," Takeo replied. "But, can you explain what just happened with this sword?" Although he hadn't paid much attention to it before, Takeo vaguely remembered that the Nichiren sword Kyojuro had temporarily lent him had a blade color close to gray. Asato Yoshizuru's sword, too, had been a greenish tone. Takeo had originally assumed they had dyed the blades afterward. But now, it seemed that wasn't the case. That, Tetsuyodashi said as he took a deep breath to calm himself. Then he began to explain, Nichiren swords change color depending on the wielder. The moment a new sword is first drawn, it adapts to its user and only that first draw causes the change. He continued with a simple explanation, the resulting color is said to reflect the breathing technique the user is most compatible with. Takeo stared at his blade in astonishment. "It changes based on the wielder?" And only the first time it's drawn? Is that even scientifically possible? This makes no scientific sense. What kind of material on Earth does this? Well, okay. This was an anime world after all. Probably best not to expect scientific explanations. Now that he had at least a rough understanding of how Nichiren swords worked, Takeo turned back to Tetsuyodashi and asked, "Then why were you so worked up just now?" "It was because of your hair and your eyes," Tetsuyodashi said, pointing at both features. "They're red, right? To us swordsmiths, that's the mark of a child of flame. If your sword had turned red too, it would have been an extremely auspicious sign. But alas, it turned out to be green. More accurately, gray-green." Takeo muttered. "That's not the point." Tetsuyodashi flared up again but quickly composed himself and continued, "In any case, I've delivered your blade, so my task here is complete. From now on, Kamado, please take good care of it. If it gets damaged or broken, I'll be responsible for repairing and maintaining it." Every demon slayer had a personal swordsmith responsible for their Nichiren blade. The swordsmith would not change unless the slayer or the smith died. Until then, they were in a sense partners. Although each swordsmith was responsible for more than one demon slayer, for the slayers themselves, barring any unforeseen circumstances, the smith who forged their blade would be the one they worked with for life. Wait. When you put it like that, it kinda sounded a little strange. Well then, Kamado, I won't stay any longer. I wish you great success in your future demon hunts. Leaving the sword behind, the swordsmith gave a polite bow and took his leave. After he departed, Senjuro came over, arms full carrying a freshly ironed Demon Slayer Corps uniform and asked, "Do you want to change into it now?" "Yep." Takeo nodded firmly. Perhaps it was because of his still young age, but just like the Haori, the uniform had been made slightly oversized. That said, it wasn't nearly as loose-fitting as the Haori had been. After all, if a uniform was too baggy, it could get in the way during actual combat. The Hashira could wear their uniforms however they wanted. That was a privilege of power. Their strength was so overwhelming that what they wore had little impact on their effectiveness. But ordinary slayers like Takeo? They didn't have that luxury. So, if Takeo continued to grow at a steady rate, this uniform would probably last him about 6 months. If he ended up growing faster than expected, it might only fit for 3 or 4 months before it became too small. That said, since demon slayers often engaged in combat with demons, their uniforms were prone to damage anyway. Returning them for adjustments like expanding or repairing was a common practice. So it wasn't something to worry too much about. What Takeo was truly interested in, though, was the quality of the uniform. Off to the side, Senjuro began explaining, "The Demon Slayer uniform is made of a special material. It's resistant to cold, heat, and moisture, and it's surprisingly breathable too. But most importantly, it has great defensive capability. A regular demon's claws can't even tear through it." "What kind of sci-fi tech is this?" "SC sci-fi tech. Nothing, just talking to myself. Don't worry about it." Takeo stood in front of a mirror, observing his reflection in the uniform while running his hands along the fabric. It was lightweight, not too heavy, and didn't feel much different from regular clothing, aside from being a bit thicker. And yet, this seemingly ordinary outfit could withstand extreme cold and heat, while also offering high defense. Takeo still clearly remembered the sight of Asato Yoshizuru fighting the water demon even when his uniform had been struck by sharp, needle-like water projectiles. The fabric hadn't been pierced. To think such a lightweight uniform could have that level of defense. If this material were used in technological development, the science of this world would probably skyrocket. Still, whatever this uniform was made of, none of that mattered now. What mattered was that Takeo was officially a member of the Demon Slayer Corps. With his uniform and Nichiren sword complete, and having passed the final selection, he was now ready. By all logic, his first mission should be coming soon. Just as that thought crossed his mind, Takeo heard the sound of flapping wings outside. Moments later, his personal Kazhigai crow flew in through the window and landed in front of him. In a timid voice, it said, hello. New mission. There's been a string of disappearances in Gyoda. The master suspects a demon is involved. Kamado squad member, please proceed to investigate. You can really say that much in one breath, huh? Putting the mission aside for the moment, Takeo was once again amazed at how intelligent the crow was. It wasn't just smart, it could carry on full conversations, practically like a person. After a brief moment of surprise, Takeo quickly gathered his thoughts and said to the Kazhigai crow, "Thanks for delivering the message, Gonichiro." Each Kazhigai crow had its own name and personality. When a crow was assigned to a new demon slayer, they could give it a nickname to distinguish it unless the crow had belonged to a previous swordsman and carried an existing name. Takeo hadn't given his crow a new name. He didn't think he was particularly good at naming things, so he just stuck with the crow's original name, Gonichiro. Gonichiro was a shy and timid crow, but even so, he worked hard to fulfill his duties. Now that Takeo had been equipped with his Nichiren sword and uniform, he figured it was time to begin truly fulfilling his role in the Demon Slayer Corps. After watching the crow fly off into the sky, Takeo turned to Senjuro and said his goodbyes. "Well, I guess I'm off. It's a shame I didn't get to see Kyojuro-san before I left. Please thank him for the Haori on my behalf." "I will. Takeo-san, be careful out there." At the gates of the Rengoku estate, Senjuro waved as Takeo walked away. And with that, Takeo officially began his first mission as a demon slayer. ________________ 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3/Horny FBI Chapter 43, Akita family's missing son. The journey from the Rengoku residence to Gyoda wasn't very far. If traveling during the day, it would take less than 2 days to reach the destination. Along the way, Takeo didn't push himself too hard to the point of wasting stamina, but he also didn't move too slowly and waste time. He kept a moderate pace, just enough to make sure he'd be in his best condition when facing the demon hiding in Gyoda. Takeo did this because he had heard from Senjuro that the Demon Slayer Corps usually assigns missions based on a swordsman's strength. And that kid named Muichiro Tokaido clearly had ties to the Yabayashiki family. The master definitely knew how powerful he was. So, if Takeo had fought Tokaido evenly and even won, then the master must also be aware of Takeo's abilities. Which meant that, even for his very first mission, Takeo might be sent to face a fairly strong demon. It could even be that others had already been sent to investigate and mysteriously vanished, so they were now dispatching someone stronger. But thinking about it now, the Corps' ranking system doesn't really make much sense. Takeo muttered to himself. He recalled the ranking system of the Demon Slayer Corps and couldn't help but complain in his heart. Someone like Asajiri Asato, who had only mastered 1 or 2 breathing techniques, was already ranked Tsuchino. But Takeo, who had created an entirely new breathing style, was still just a Mizunoto. Sure, combat strength doesn't always align perfectly with rank, but still, shouldn't higher ranks generally mean greater strength? So even the Demon Slayer Corps hasn't escaped the bad habit of seniority-based rankings, huh? Takeo wondered whether the Corps allowed any kind of ranking skips. Actually, they did. If someone managed to slay a member of the 12 Kizuki, they could be promoted directly to Hashira, regardless of their rank, but the 12 Kizuki weren't exactly easy to run into. And even if Takeo did, chances were high he wouldn't be able to defeat one. If slaying one of the 12 Kizuki qualified a person to become a Hashira, then to play it safe, it was best to assume that the Kizuki were on par with the Hashira in strength. Besides, Takeo figured that even 5 of himself combined probably wouldn't be able to beat Kyojuro. So not being able to defeat Akazuki? Perfectly reasonable. 2 days passed in a flash, and Takeo officially stepped into the town of Gyota. Watching the people bustling through the streets, he instinctively tucked the Nichiren sword behind his Haori before starting to consider how to investigate the disappearances here. Demons were excellent at hiding themselves. A normal search wouldn't yield anything. And in a town like this, with so many people around, scents were extremely scattered. If he couldn't narrow down a specific area to search, then not even his sharp sense of smell would help locate a demon. Which meant the first step was to find someone involved with one of the missing persons cases. That part wouldn't be hard to investigate. In an era with so few entertainment options, most people passed the time by gossiping with neighbors. Any little incident in someone's home could be spread and discussed for an entire day. A disappearance was no small matter naturally. Even now, there were still people talking about it. Takeo simply needed to stand around a crowded area and listen for a while to learn which family had a missing person. After asking a few questions about directions, he quickly found himself standing in front of the home of one of the most recent victims. The family was named Akita. Their eldest son had gone missing 3 days ago, making him the latest known disappearance. There weren't many people in the Akita household. Besides the missing eldest son, there was only a younger son around 12 or 13 years old, and an elderly father. The mother had passed away years ago from complications during childbirth, so the father had raised both sons alone. With the eldest son now missing, the family had lost their main laborer, plunging an already difficult life into even deeper hardship. When Takeo arrived, the family was in the middle of firing pottery. The Akita family made their living through pottery. Households like theirs were fairly common in Gyota, so none of them earned particularly well. Simply surviving was already a struggle. The door was wide open. The earthy scent of clay lingered in the air, and Takeo swept his gaze across the courtyard. His eyes immediately locked onto the elderly man shaping a clay vessel on a spinning wheel in the yard. The man wore a kimono the color of mud. A cloth was tied around his head, holding his hair back. His face was deeply lined with wrinkles, and his hands covered in wet clay bore visible scars and age. Takeo observed the scene for a moment, then lightly knocked on the open door. The elderly man's hands paused briefly before he looked up at Takeo and offered a smile. "Looking to buy some pottery?" "No, I'm here to ask you a few questions." Takeo got straight to the point. "May I ask, where did your eldest son go missing?" The old man's smile instantly faded. His gaze shifted to the uniform beneath Takeo's haori, his brow furrowed. Then he turned his attention back to the spinning wheel and resumed shaping the clay. "No idea. Don't ask me. Go play somewhere else, kid." His tone had turned curt and impatient, but Takeo picked up on the weariness in his voice. It sounded like this wasn't the first time he'd been asked that question. Takeo hesitated for a second, intending to press further when a soft voice interrupted from the side, "Are you looking for my brother?" Takeo turned and saw a child standing by the gate, wearing a brown kimono, his hair cut short and tied with a brown cord. He was holding a bucket filled with water. This was likely the younger son of the household, who had just returned from fetching water. Takeo looked the boy over and nodded. "Yes. I'm investigating the disappearances. You can think of me as a detective. So if you know anything, I'd really appreciate your help." Detective. You can think of it as a private investigator who handles strange cases." Takeo gave a simple explanation. In this era, the term detective hadn't yet become widespread in Japan. Even if some had heard of it, it was mostly in bustling cities like Tokyo or Osaka. That's why in a remote town like Gyota, few would understand what a detective was. But just because no one knew didn't mean the profession didn't exist. Takeo had already decided if he ran into more situations like this where it wasn't immediately clear whether demons were involved, he'd just say he was a detective. It was better than saying he was part of the Demon Slayer Corps. After all, people might vaguely understand what a detective is. But if you tell them you're with the Demon Slayer Corps, who would know what that means? But you look like you're the same age as me, the boy said, eyeing him suspiciously. Takeo was just about to explain when the old man in the yard shouted, "Tojiro! How long are you going to stand at the door? Hurry up and bring that water over." "Coming." The boy named Tojiro walked into the courtyard carrying the water bucket, but before stepping in, he whispered to Takeo, "Father doesn't really like people bringing up anything about my brother. Go wait for me by the stone platform at the corner of the street. I'll come find you when I'm done." With that, Tojiro brushed past Takeo and headed toward the old man, joining him to help with the work. Takeo watched the two of them busily working and, after a moment of thought, chose not to interrupt further. He turned and walked toward the stone platform Tojiro had mentioned. The old man didn't seem like the most approachable person, but this kid, Tojiro, seemed more open. Maybe he'd be able to get some information from him. _______________ 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3 / Horny FBI Chapter 44, My brother wouldn't abandon us? The coin flipped into the air and fell back down. Takeo caught it and stared up at the gradually darkening sky in boredom. The sun was just about to set, nightfall was approaching. The lanterns along the streets had already been lit, but Tojiro still hadn't shown up. Don't tell me that kid ditched me. Takeo couldn't help but start doubting whether that seemingly honest child had lied to him. Maybe he'd never intended to come in the first place. But just as that thought formed, he heard footsteps approaching from the distance. Turning his head, he saw that it was indeed Tojiro. The boy jogged over to Takeo, looking completely exhausted. Clearly, he was worn out from the day's work. As soon as he arrived, he apologized, "Sorry. Someone placed a big order for pottery a couple of days ago, so we've been really busy." "It's fine. Are you done for the day now?" "Yeah, mostly. It's time to rest anyway. Electricity's expensive." By this point in time, electricity had already been introduced to Japan, and towns near the bigger cities had access to it too. However, electricity was still considered a luxury most common households tried to conserve as much as possible. That's why people typically wound down quickly after nightfall instead of working late into the night. Takeo nodded slightly to show he understood, then asked, "Earlier, you said you'd tell me about your brother." "Yeah, I'll tell you so long as you can find him, I'll tell you everything." Tojiro replied seriously, without a hint of hesitation, and began explaining what had happened to his older brother, Toichiro. There were 3 people in the Akita household. The father, Akita Seiku, was a potter by trade. Akita Toichiro was Seiku's eldest son, 22 years old this year. By all accounts, he should have inherited the family's pottery skills. But perhaps due to the recent wave of industrial reform, he became increasingly determined to leave for the big city to find work. He claimed that working in a factory would earn far more than making pottery in this little backwater town. Seiku didn't understand factories or machines. He simply believed that Toichiro refusing to inherit the family craft was a form of rebellion, an act of filial betrayal. As a result, the two often quarreled. 3 days ago was their worst fight yet. That day, in a fit of rage, Toichiro smashed a batch of freshly fired pottery that his father had just finished. Seiku, furious, grabbed a stick and drove him out of the house. Tojiro remembered that it had been right around sunset. After Toichiro stormed off, he never came back. Most people assumed he had gone missing, but their father, Akita Seiku, was convinced the rebellious son had simply taken the opportunity to run off to that city he always dreamed about. That's why he refused to speak much about it. Whenever others came asking, he usually didn't have the patience to deal with them and would chase them off. The only reason he hadn't kicked Takeo out today was probably because Takeo looked young, otherwise, he too would have been shown the door by Akita Seiku. So, according to that, your brother just went to the city and didn't actually go missing? Takeo asked, puzzled. Tojiro pressed his lips together and said, no. That's just what my father thinks. My brother, he definitely went missing. Why are you so sure? Takeo asked. Because my brother really cared about us. If he really was going to leave, he would have at least left me a letter. But he didn't. So I know something's wrong, he must have gone missing. Tojiro raised his voice slightly, speaking with conviction. To him, his brother Toichiro had his flaws. He didn't always show respect to their father, but he genuinely cared for both Tojiro and Akita Seiku. The proof? Despite constantly saying he wanted to run off to the city, he never truly left, not unless their father gave permission. He kept learning their father's craft and helped with the pottery. If he truly hated his family, he would have been gone long ago. He wouldn't have stayed this long. So, if you're really here to investigate the disappearance, please help me find my brother. As he spoke, Tojiro bowed deeply to Takeo. Takeo crossed his arms, thinking. If this were just a normal missing person case, there was a good chance Toichiro might still be alive. But if a demon was involved, then after 3 whole days, Toichiro's chances of survival were slim. Takeo couldn't promise something he might not be able to deliver. As Takeo remained silent, Tojiro also stayed bowed and unmoving. Seeing this, Takeo finally said, I'll do my best to help you find him. But I can't guarantee that I'll succeed. Tojiro was quiet for a moment, then suddenly asked, is it because of a demon? Takeo's eyes widened in shock. How do you know about demons? Yesterday, someone dressed like you came here asking questions. He said he was from the Demon Slayer Corps and that he was investigating a demon-related case. He even said my brother might have been taken by a demon. But my father doesn't believe in any of that, so he drove him away. Tojiro explained. Another demon slayer came here before me? If there had already been a demon slayer sent, then why was Takeo called in as well? Takeo couldn't help but feel puzzled, but he still turned to ask Tojiro, do you know where that demon slayer went after your father drove him off? Tojiro shook his head. He left not long after. I only saw him heading in that direction. I don't know anything beyond that. As Tojiro spoke, he pointed in a specific direction. Takeo looked toward it thoughtfully, when Tojiro added, oh, right. I remember Hanako-Nisan lives over that way. Hanako-Nisan. Her older brother was the first one to go missing. So I think, maybe that demon slayer went to see her. Hanako. Takeo blinked, momentarily dazed at hearing that name. After all, among the Kamado siblings, there had once been a girl named Kamado, Hanako, Takeo's little sister. But now, her age had been frozen at 10 years old, never to grow up. Still, the name Hanako was quite common in Japan, especially in the countryside. In a village full of young girls, if you shouted Hanako, there'd probably be at least 2 or 3 who answered. So it wasn't all that surprising. After confirming Hanako's address with Tojiro, Takeo politely took his leave. Before leaving, he told Tojiro, I'll do my best to find your brother. If I learn anything, I'll come back and let you know. Please, I'm counting on you. Tojiro bowed deeply once again. Takeo waved behind him without turning back and headed toward Hanako's home. Her full name was Taniguchi Hanako, 15 years old. She had lived with her older brother, Taniguchi Ida, relying on each other for survival. Their family ran a small silk shop. Ida was responsible for purchasing silk threads, while Hanako wove the fabric. Life had been decent, until it all changed 4 months ago. Taniguchi Ida had suddenly gone missing, leaving only Hanako to keep things running. At first, she managed, but over the past month, people had started causing trouble for her. After all, she was a frail young girl with no family to protect her, an easy target for bullies. Some kind-hearted neighbors had advised Hanako to consider marrying into a good household for stability and safety. That way, she wouldn't have to struggle alone. But whether it was because she still believed her brother would return, or simply didn't trust anyone else, Hanako had refused all matchmaking attempts. She remained at home, waiting for her brother's return. By the time Takeo arrived at Taniguchi Hanako's home, it was already nightfall. The silk shop had closed for the day. A faint light shone dimly through the paper windows, casting soft shadows on the ground. Sniff sniff, Takeo stood at the entrance, nostrils flaring slightly. Then, he narrowed his eyes. He seemed to smell something familiar. That scent, could it be Asato? With that thought, Takeo didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and knocked on the door. Knock knock knock. A voice called out from inside the house, "Who is it?" It wasn't Hanako's voice, it was a man's voice, one that Takeo recognized instantly. Hearing it, Takeo immediately figured out which Demon Slayer Corps member was already investigating this area. He sighed lightly and answered directly, "Yo. It's me. Kamado Takeo." "Huh?" A surprised voice responded, followed by the door creaking open. Standing in the doorway was Fangzuru Asato, his short black hair slightly tousled. "What the? Takeo? You passed the final selection? That fast? Only natural. But what are you doing here?" "That's what I wanted to ask you. What are you doing here, you unit of measurement?" Staring at Asato, Takeo found himself wondering the exact same thing. Underscore 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 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3/Horny FBI Chapter 45, 45. A crafty demon standing before him was the unit of measurement. No, wait, not a unit of measurement, but Yoshizuru Asato himself. At this moment, he looked nothing like a demon slayer. He had removed his uniform, revealing a white undershirt beneath. In his hand, he held a rice ball, oblivious to the grains of rice stuck to his face. Combined with his current expression of astonishment, the scene was quite comical. Takeo gave him a long look before speaking. "I received a mission stating there have been disappearances here, likely due to a demon, so I came." "What about you?" "Same as you. I happened to be nearby, so I was summoned here. They mentioned another slayer would be assisting me." "Wait, could that other slayer be you?" "What do you think, unit of measurement?" Takeo rolled his eyes at Yoshizuru Asato. The last time they met, he thought this guy seemed reliable. But now, he seemed completely different. Unit of measurement? What do you mean?" Yoshizuru Asato couldn't comprehend Takeo's words. Now possessing the strength of 8 Asatos, Takeo chose to ignore Yoshizuru Asato and looked into the room. Inside the room, a young girl wearing a crimson kimono was seated on the tatami floor, eating. She had a rather pretty appearance, delicate features, gently arched eyebrows, and a pitifully endearing aura that naturally evoked a protective instinct in others. Her hair was styled into a bun, neatly secured with a hairpin. When she saw Takeo enter, she put down her bowl and chopsticks, turned toward him, and gave a small nod in greeting. After stepping inside, Takeo returned the gesture politely and said, "You must be Miss Taniguchi Hanako, correct? My name is Kamado Takeo. Like this guy over here, I'm a member of the Demon Slayer Corps." "Hey. I'm a rank B Slayer now. At least show some respect for your senior, will you?" Yoshizuru Asato clearly wasn't pleased by Takeo's casual tone. He walked up beside Takeo, raised his sleeve to show the insignia indicating his current rank, and said, "See that? Rank B. But you still can't beat me." Takeo chose to speak the plain truth. Yoshizuru Asato. He, you two seem to have a good relationship. Seeing their interaction, Taniguchi Hanako covered her mouth with a light laugh, then turned to Takeo and said, Kamado-san, please come in. Have you had dinner yet? If not, come join us. I made a few too many rice balls today. Hanako brought the basket of rice balls over and held it out toward Takeo. Takeo didn't stand on ceremony. After giving them a quick sniff, he sat down with a smile and said, I actually haven't eaten yet, so thank you for the kind offer, Miss Taniguchi. Oh, and just call me Takeo, there's no need to add any honorifics like san. Hearing that, Hanako smiled without saying much. Yoshizuru Asato, meanwhile, returned after shutting the door, sitting down across from Hanako. He then said to Takeo, Hanako-san's cooking is pretty good, you're in for a treat. That made Takeo glance at him sideways. You've got some nerve saying that. What do you mean? You were supposed to be investigating the demon, but instead you're here loafing around. And you're calling yourself a rank B slayer. Takeo made no effort to hide the sarcasm in his tone. That made Asato twitch at the corner of his mouth. Ha! This guy. You've really gotten sharp-tongued in the short time we haven't seen each other. And even more disrespectful to your seniors. So, what exactly is going on? Takeo looked toward Asato, this time a bit more seriously. Although he had only spent a few days with Yoshizuru Asato, he was certain that Asato wasn't the kind of person who'd slack off when it came to duty. If he had stayed here, there had to be a reason. Asato sighed and was just about to explain when Hanako spoke up from the side, Yoshizuru-san, allow me to explain. Asato was momentarily surprised, then nodded in agreement. Sure, that works. Takeo turned his attention toward Hanako. She gave him another respectful bow before speaking, here's what happened yesterday, Yoshizuru-san saved me. Yoshizuru Asato had met Taniguchi Hanako just the day before. At the time, Hanako had been returning from purchasing silk threads when she ran into a group of local thugs who had been harassing her lately. Though thugs might be too harsh, more accurately, they were some older, single men from around the town who had been trying to marry her. However, most of them were significantly older, some even old enough to be Hanako's father, so naturally she had no intention of accepting their advances. Even if those men had been the right age, Hanako wouldn't have agreed to marry any of them. As she put it, she was waiting for her brother to come home. But those men didn't see it that way. They believed her brother had been missing for so long that there was no chance he'd return, and that Hanako, living alone, wouldn't be able to support herself much longer. So they pressured her to pick one of them as a reliable partner. Naturally, Hanako refused, and the situation turned into a scuffle in the alleyway. In the end, predictably, Yoshizuru Asato arrived just in time, staging a textbook hero saves the damsel scene and rescuing Hanako. Grateful for his help, and learning he was investigating the disappearance while also having no place to stay, Hanako invited him to stay at her home. And then you just stayed here for a whole day. Having understood the full context, Takeo looked toward Asato again. Asato shook his head. Of course not. I went out to investigate again today, but I still didn't find any leads. Hanako-san said I could stay here until the investigation ends, so I accepted. You really don't hold back, huh? Oh? So that means you already have a place to stay tonight. Yoshizuru Asato shot the question right back at Takeo. Takeo fell silent. Seeing this, Hanako chuckled softly and said with a gentle voice, if you don't mind, you're welcome to stay here as well. My brother's room still has some space. Although the Taniguchi household wasn't large, her older brother Ida had once thoughtfully partitioned their shared bedroom with wooden boards, perhaps because he knew Hanako was growing up and it was no longer appropriate for them to sleep in the same room. Yoshizuru Asato had stayed in that partitioned room last night, and there was no problem with Takeo joining him there tonight. Then thank you very much, Miss Taniguchi. Takeo politely expressed his gratitude. Hanako shook her head with a smile and went to prepare the bedding. While she was busy, Takeo took the chance to compare notes with Asato. So? Did you manage to find anything these past 2 days, and please wipe the rice from your face before speaking. Ha, look at this guy. You've officially become a member of the Demon Slayer Corps just now, but I've even moved up to rank B. Can't you show a little more respect? Yoshizuru Asato was clearly annoyed, making sure once again to emphasize the fact that he'd advanced from rank C to rank B. Takeo let out a long sigh and replied half-heartedly, all right. Then please share with me the intel you've gathered over the past 2 days. Senior Asato. That sounded so half-hearted. You gonna talk or not? Irritated by the back and forth, Takeo pushed impatiently. Sensing the danger in Takeo's gaze, Yoshizuru Asato finally stopped joking and turned serious. All right. First, I've got some bad news. The demon we're dealing with this time is crafty, really clever and very good at hiding. What do you mean? In the 2 days I've been here, that demon hasn't eaten anyone. It knows we're here. Yoshizuru Asato's expression was grim as he spoke. The disappearance of Akita Toichiro had happened 3 days ago. Asato had arrived yesterday to investigate. And from the moment he arrived, there hadn't been a single new disappearance in the entire town. Asato had spent the entire day today investigating, and he hadn't found a single clue related to the demon. _______________________ 1-2 Advanced Chapters P@Trian/Horny FBI Chapter 46, 46, The Similar Smell. Yoshizuru Asato continued, moreover, there's another point that concerns me. He added, the missing persons in this town all seem to be unsavory individuals. Really? Are you certain? Takeo asked, surprised. Yoshizuru nodded. Aside from Hanako's older brother, Taniguchi Ida, the others had questionable reputations. Since the first disappearance, Taniguchi Ida, several months ago, a total of 8 people had gone missing in the town. Except for Ida and Akita Toichiro, the rest were known local delinquents. These individuals were notorious for their misconduct, some living off inherited wealth without contributing to society, others relying on family support, and some engaging in theft or robbery. Though few in number, their actions had made them infamous in the town. Due to their reputations, their disappearances didn't garner much concern from the townspeople. In fact, some even felt relieved. Consequently, even the disappearances of relatively innocent individuals like Taniguchi Ida and Akita Toichiro were met with indifference, as rumors suggested they might have been involved in dubious activities. This was what Yoshizuru Asato had managed to uncover over the past 2 days. You're telling me this demon is deliberately targeting bad people? That's got to be the funniest thing I've ever heard. Takeo couldn't help but laugh. After all, once someone becomes a demon, they lose all sense of reason and memory from their human life. They're entirely driven by instinct. No matter how kind a person might have been before, once they turn into a demon, they become humanity's enemy. Devouring humans is a demon's basic instinct. They don't care whether the person is good or bad. At most, they differentiate based on physical traits like age or gender, picking and choosing their meals based on taste or texture. A demon that only eats bad people? That simply didn't exist. Takeo was convinced there was something else going on here. Yoshizuru nodded. I think something's off, too. If the demon really only preyed on bad people, then what about Taniguchi Ida and Akita Toichiro? Did you check the places where they disappeared? No. Both of them went missing around sunset, and in quiet alleyways where hardly anyone passes through. No one saw them vanish. All we can do is investigate the last place someone remembers seeing them. So in the end, you didn't find anything at all, is that right? Takeo frowned as he asked. Yoshizuru Asato gave a slight nod, his expression serious. Finding nothing at all, that was the worst case scenario. Normally, if a demon had been active, it would leave behind traces or a lingering scent. But the troubling thing now was that even with Takeo's sharp sense of smell, he couldn't detect any trace of a demon in the town. It was as if the demon didn't exist at all. Demons that could conceal themselves that well were always the most troublesome kind. At a conservative estimate, this one might be close to the level of a member of the 12 Kizuki. And if that were truly the case, then even with both him and Yoshizuru present, it would be difficult to take the demon down even if they found it. After a brief pause, Takeo asked again, "Has any demon slayer gone missing here before?" "No." Yoshizuru replied immediately. "I'm the first demon slayer to be sent here for investigation. No other squad members have been here before me. After all, these disappearances had only started occurring a few months ago, and the number of missing people wasn't high. Most of those who had vanished had a history of misconduct, so aside from their families, no one really cared. If the Demon Slayer Corps hadn't been constantly monitoring cases of mysterious disappearances where no trace of the victims could be found, these incidents in this town would have been buried and forgotten before long." After learning everything Yoshizuru Asato had gathered through his investigation, Takeo picked up his Nichiren sword and stood up. Yoshizuru noticed and asked, "Heading out to patrol?" "Forget it, I already walked through the entire town last night. Didn't even catch a glimpse of a demon." "I have to at least do something," Takeo replied. Demons usually appeared at night. If one hoped to find them, the evening was the best time to search. The problem was that this demon was incredibly skilled at hiding itself, so even patrolling at night wasn't likely to yield any results. Still, even knowing that, Takeo felt he had to at least try. He couldn't just sit around doing nothing. "Then I won't tag along." "Be careful out there," Yoshizuru warned. Takeo gave a slight nod. With his current strength, Takeo shouldn't have any problems as long as he doesn't run into a member of the 12 Kizuki, but there was no need to tell Asato that, in case it hurt a certain unit of measurement's pride. Thinking this to himself, Takeo left the room and began his night patrol. But just as Yoshizuru Asato had said, the town was peaceful at night. The demon that should be active after dark didn't even leave a shadow behind. Takeo searched the entire town throughout the night but still couldn't find any trace of demonic presence. For a brief moment, Takeo even doubted whether there was a demon in this town at all, wondering if the disappearances had some other cause. However, if the missing persons weren't victims of a demon, and were taken by, say, human traffickers, why would they target those rowdy delinquents and thugs instead of easier targets like women or children? It's not like there's really someone out there delivering vigilante justice at night, right? I just don't get it. Takeo continued investigating all the way until the next morning. With nothing to show for it, he casually bought some breakfast on the street and returned to Hanako's house to rest. Miss Hanako was truly gentle and kind. She was a traditional Yamato Nadeshiko sort of woman. Even as Takeo and Asato imposed on her during their stay, she never voiced a single complaint. She even prepared meals and hot water for bathing. Even though she had no idea what Takeo had been doing last night, she didn't question him at all, just thoughtfully had breakfast ready for him. Being treated so thoughtfully, Takeo couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. In contrast, he actually admired Yoshizuru Asato's thick skin. How could this guy stay at Hanako's house with such peace of mind? Could it be that he had taken a liking to Hanako and was planning to use his hero saving the damsel moment as leverage to make her feel indebted? "Why are you looking at me like that?" Perhaps Takeo's gaze was too blatant. Yoshizuru Asato glanced at him and frowned, asking. Takeo, still eating his rice ball, replied, "Tisk, I was just thinking, someone sure doesn't seem shy at all. How long do you plan to stay here?" As soon as he heard that, Asato understood what that earlier look in Takeo's eyes had meant. He immediately answered, "At most 2 more days. If I can't find any trace of the demon, I'll leave. Then the Corps will send someone else who specializes in investigation." The Demon Slayer Corps actually had a variety of specialists, those skilled in combat, those good at tracking, and those adept at investigations. Almost every type existed. If Yoshizuru Isato really couldn't find the demon, the Corps would naturally send someone better suited to the task. Takeo nodded and said nothing more. If he couldn't find the demon within the next 2 days either, he would also leave. The first reason was that he couldn't stay indefinitely in the home of an unmarried girl. The second reason was that he couldn't afford to waste time. He hadn't forgotten his vow to avenge the Kamado family, nor his goal of finding Tanjiro and Nezuko. Speaking of which, those two didn't even participate in this year's final selection. Where on earth had they gone? Setting aside the whereabouts of the missing Tanjiro and Nezuko for now, Takeo, after finishing breakfast, took a short nap at Hanako's house to rest for half a day. When he woke up in the afternoon, he went out again to search for any clues about the demon, while also gathering information on the other missing persons. But instead of finding any trace of a demon, during the search, Takeo picked up a familiar scent. That was the smell of rice crackers. Or to be precise, the scent of Sakuma Iori. ____________. She's back okay. Before any of you say anything, I've learned from my past mistakes, and I've made her a little more likable. Saluting face, loudly crying face, saluting face. 1-2 Advance Chapters Patreon/horny FBI Chapter 47, 47, Your crow is a perfect match for you. Sakuma Iori. Why is she here? Because he'd spent quite a lot of time around Sakuma Iori, Takeo could easily recognize her scent. That faint fragrance of rice crackers had practically become her trademark. And whether it was due to Iori using some special ingredients in her rice crackers or not, the scent of hers was slightly different from ordinary ones, distinct enough for Takeo to be certain it was her. Puzzled by why Iori would be in this town, Takeo followed the scent in the direction it came from. Not long after walking, he spotted Sakuma Iori on the side of the street, now dressed in a Demon Slayer uniform with a box strapped to her back. After observing for a moment, Takeo noticed that what Iori carried on her back was her Nichiren sword. Because of the sword prohibition edict, Demon Slayer Corps members weren't allowed to openly carry blades in public. Yoshizuru Isato had arrived in town around dusk, when few people saw him. Takeo, on the other hand, had Kyojuro's gifted Haori. Its wide fabric easily concealed his sword underneath. Now Sakuma Iori had opted for a different method. She had constructed a box to house her blade. A clever approach? Well, you can say that. After all, demons didn't appear during the day, and once it was nighttime and time to fight, there would be no need to keep the sword in the box. That said, Iori's uniform was quite conservative. But why is her uniform not like the standard uniform similar to Kenroji-san? Takeo recalled Kenroji Mitsurai's outfit and then glanced back at Iori's uniform. Compared to Mitsurai's, Iori's attire seemed modest, almost too modest. Scanning Sakuma Iori up and down, Takeo soon came to the conclusion that it was probably because certain parts of Iori were a bit lacking. Yes. That must be why she was wearing the male version of the uniform. After a moment spent observing Iori's current appearance, Takeo turned his attention to what she was doing. This girl was holding a map and asking passers-by for directions. Was she lost? Takeo speculated silently, having no intention of approaching her. At first, he had assumed Sakuma Iori was another Demon Slayer Corps member sent here for backup, so he came over just to see what she was up to. But from the looks of things, her mission must be different from his. She had likely just passed through the area by coincidence. Since that was the case, there was no need to delay her any further. Yet, let's not meet her. At least, That's what Takeo thought until he had just turned around and heard her voice call out behind him, "Ah! Takeo!" Now that Iori had spotted him, Takeo had no choice but to stop and turn around. He looked at her with an expression of exasperation and said, "I was standing so far away, and you still managed to spot me. Well, your red hair is way too conspicuous. I recognized you in an instant." Sakuma Iori pointed to her eyes proudly and added, "My eyes are just like your nose. It's my special trait. But didn't you still get lost?" Takeo gave her a meaningful look. Iori's body immediately stiffened, her eyes darted around guiltily, and she mumbled softly, "Not being familiar with the roads, doesn't count as getting lost. Besides, it's my first time here. Not knowing the way is totally normal." Seeing that Iori was about to launch into full-on literary justification like Konyuji, Takeo cut her off and asked, "Where's your Kajigai crow?" For members of the Demon Slayer Corps, the Kajigai crows didn't just deliver messages, they also guided the Slayers to their destinations. Normally, there was no reason for Iori to be wandering around asking for directions herself. As it turned out, Takeo really shouldn't have asked, because as soon as he did, Iori visibly deflated. With a sigh, she answered, "It got lost. Yuzo can remember the location of the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters, and she can track me down by scent, but when it comes to places she hasn't been to before, she gets lost very easily. And the place we're headed to now, she's never been there before." Iori muttered her explanation, her voice getting quieter and her face growing redder the longer she spoke. Her Kajigai crow was named Yuzu, a female with a bright and energetic personality, not much different from her own, which made them a great match. Normally, as long as Yuzu had been to a place before, she could find it blindfolded, flying in circles and still land at the exact spot. But when it came to unfamiliar locations, well, let's just say if she didn't get lost, that would be considered a miracle. And clearly, this time, the miracle hadn't happened. How should I put this? After listening to Iori recount the whole tragic tale of her crow's navigation failure, Takeo paused for a moment, then said, "This crow really is a perfect match for you." "What? Takeo, are you making fun of me?" Iori instantly picked up on the jab and gave Takeo a sharp glare full of suspicion. Takeo didn't deny or explain. Instead, he smoothly changed the subject and asked, "So, where are you heading now?" "I'm heading to a place called Dust Mountain. I think it's a small peak. A few Demon Slayer members have already gone ahead." Iori was quickly diverted by Takeo's question and responded accordingly. Hearing that, Takeo raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Is it a group mission?" "Yeah. An intermediate rank Slayer is leading the team, with at least 4 other Slayers of different ranks providing support." "But I'm probably already late," Iori said helplessly. The final deadline for the rendezvous was today. But judging from how lost Iori had gotten, and her not so impressive speed, it was unlikely she'd make it in time. Showing up late on her very first mission, there was no telling if that would negatively affect her standing with her superiors. Takeo wasn't too surprised that Iori had been assigned a group mission. The Demon Slayer Corps assigned missions based on one's performance during the final selection and current capabilities. Those with higher strength were typically given solo missions like Takeo. Those with more average or developing skill sets were often placed in team missions. The reasons were twofold: to let veteran Slayers lead and guide, and to give newer members experience in real combat and demon hunting procedures. Iori belonged to the latter group. "You really are hopeless." Takeo sighed at the sight of Iori's flustered expression. Lifting his head, he called out, "Kotaro." Kotaro, Takeo's Kajigai crow, was nearby. Upon hearing Takeo's voice, the bird quickly swooped down and landed on his shoulder. "Why, yes." Takeo instructed, "Help locate the Demon Slayer team headed to Dust Mountain. If you find them, have one of their Kazhigai crows come here to guide her. Oh okay. Kotaro responded weakly before flapping his wings and soaring into the sky. Realizing she wouldn't have to keep wandering around lost, Iora beamed and threw herself at Takeo. My little Takeo, I knew you cared about me after all. If you keep jumping on me like that, I swear I'll punch you. Takeo's face went flat and deadpan as Iora clung to him, nuzzling enthusiastically. Instead of letting go, Iori hugged him even tighter and said playfully, "Don't be so mean. I'll give you some rice crackers. Don't think a few rice crackers are enough to bribe me. Then I'll give you all the rice crackers. That's not a bad deal?" Shamefully, Takeo was successfully bribed by Iori. Can't be helped after days of eating nothing but regular rice balls, sushi, and udon, Takeo was truly sick of it all. And with his own lack of cooking skills, his taste buds were practically going numb. Iora's specially made rice crackers, high in salt and flavor, had somehow become a rare delicacy to him. After going without them for a while, he found himself actually craving them. "Oh right, I haven't asked yet, why are you even here?" After clinging to him for a while longer, Iora finally remembered to ask the obvious question. Takeo pushed her away with an exasperated look. "Surprising that your pea-brain actually remembered to ask that. Then go ahead and try using that not-so-smart head of yours to guess why do you think I'm here. There's a demon. Correct. But no reward." After Takeo responded, he noticed Iori suddenly fall into thought. She turned and looked him up and down, noting the absence of any dust or signs of travel on his clothing. She couldn't help but ask, "You got here yesterday, didn't you?" "Yeah. But the fact that you're still here, means you haven't killed the demon yet, right? You didn't find it?" Iori wasn't stupid, she just usually didn't like using her brain too much, But when she got serious, she could pick up on subtle details pretty well. Like now, for example. Takeo nodded slightly and was about to explain his mission, but then, remembering Iora's sharp observation skills, he looked up and said, "Come to think of it, your timing's perfect. Help me figure out where this demon is hiding." 1-2 Advanced Chapters Patreon/Horny FBI Chapter 48, 48, Unusual Reaction, "So you just brought her along." In Hanako's home, Yoshizuru Asato looked at Takeo with disbelief as he noticed yet another member of the Demon Slayer Corps had joined them. Takeo glanced nonchalantly at Yoshizuru Asato. "Is that a problem?" "Well, not exactly," Asato replied, rubbing his chin as he analyzed the situation. "But we're likely just dealing with an ordinary demon at most, one that's eaten 4 or 5 people. For a demon like that, do we really need 3 people to take it down?" So far, fewer than 10 people had gone missing in this town, which meant the demon couldn't have devoured more than 8 or 9. A demon of that level was only slightly stronger than the ones encountered during the final selection. Any officially ranked demon slayer could take care of such a demon on their own. There was simply no need to send in multiple members. And in fact, the Corps was only going to dispatch Takeo for this mission. But since this demon looked somewhat intelligent, and it was Takeo's first mission, they had assigned Asato this mission as Takeo's senior simply because he happened to be nearby and it was convenient for him to assist. Besides, Asato already knew Takeo, so it was convenient for him to lead the newcomer. But now, yet another person had joined them, a fellow demon slayer who had entered the Corps at the same time as Takeo. Their combined combat strength was already overkill. Besides, that girl named Sakuma Iora, she should have her own mission, right? Was it really okay for her to stay here with them? Iora's perception is sharp. I think she might notice things we can't, so I brought her along, Takeo explained casually. Yoshizuru Asato had been about to object when Sakuma Iora bowed respectfully and said, "Good evening, senpai." That single word senpai sent a wave of satisfaction through Asato's entire body. The stern refusal he had been about to voice instantly melted away. His face broke into a wide grin. Sakuma Iori, is it? Very good, so energetic. Until your guiding Kazhigai Crow comes to retrieve you, just stay with us for now. You sure changed your attitude fast. Seeing how quickly Asato had been won over by a single word, Takeo couldn't help but mutter. Asato shot him a glare. You don't get it? Polite, respectful kids like this should absolutely be guided by a proper senpai like me. Yes, yes, senpai, Takeo drawled, his tone thick with sarcasm. That response earned him a dramatic eye roll from Asato. Clearly, Takeo's utterly insincere use of senpai gave Asato zero sense of seniority or satisfaction. So, Asato decided not to argue with Takeo and led Iori into Hanako's home. Hanako's shop was still open for business, and entering through the front door with a group could disrupt things, so they all went around to the back entrance instead. Hearing the commotion, Hanako came out to greet them. When she noticed Iori among the group, she looked surprised and asked, "Oh my, and who is this young girl?" "She's Sakuma Iori, also a member of the Demon Slayer Corps. You can just call her Iori, Hanako-san," Takeo explained as he introduced her. When Hanako heard that Iori was also a Demon Slayer, she blinked in surprise. It took her a couple of seconds to process it before she smiled warmly and said to Iori, "Hello, Miss Sakuma. I didn't expect there would be beautiful girls like you among the Demon Slayer Corps." Sakuma Iori blinked but didn't respond. Hanako gave the group another glance and then said, "Everyone, please come in." "I apologize, Miss Sakuma, I still have other guests to attend to, so I won't be able to host you right away. Please make yourself at home." As Hanako spoke, she hurried off toward the front of the shop. It seemed there were customers waiting. Once she was gone, Takeo turned to Iori and asked, "Well? Did you notice anything? Have you both been staying at this lady's house these past few days?" Sakuma Iori replied with a question of her own. Takeo shook his head. "I only stayed here for one night. He's been here for two." By he, Takeo was referring to Yoshizuru Asato. Still unsure what was going on, Asato frowned and asked the two of them, "What is it? Did you notice something? Why are you asking that?" From the way Takeo had just questioned Iori, it seemed like he suspected something about Hanako. But what exactly was Takeo suspicious of? Yoshizuru Asato didn't quite understand. Sakuma Iori paused in thought. She didn't answer Asato's question directly. Instead, she asked another, "Then, neither of you did anything inappropriate over the past 2 days, right?" "Ayo. Oh, of course not." Yoshizuru Asato answered immediately. "I've only been staying here, that's all. I definitely haven't done anything improper to Miss Hanako." "Then that's strange." Sakuma Iori frowned and murmured to herself. Hearing that, Takeo pressed, "What's strange? What did you notice? Didn't you feel like she's afraid of us?" Sakuma Iori turned the question back to Takeo. This time, Takeo fell silent. She was right. The reason he had found Hanako suspicious in the first place was precisely because of how she behaved toward him and Asato. On the surface, she was polite, almost overly so, and seemed genuinely grateful to Asato. But in reality, Takeo could sense a faint trace of fear coming from her. This was also a result of Takeo's enhanced abilities. His nose seemed to have become even more sensitive, as if he could smell emotions in the air. It was a skill he had only recently started to develop, so he wasn't entirely sure of its reliability yet. Especially after he had sensed Hanako's emotional state, he had begun to doubt himself. After all, why would Hanako be afraid of Yoshizuru Asato, the person who had rescued her? Of course, even if he hadn't been mistaken, Takeo figured it might simply be because they were men and they carried swords. Hanako, being in a more vulnerable position, might just be instinctively afraid. Still, even with that reasoning, the feeling stuck with Takeo. Now that Sakuma Iori had voiced the same thing, it confirmed that Takeo's sense of smell hadn't been wrong. Hanako was definitely afraid of them. Afraid of Demon Slayer Corps members. Wait, Takeo, are you saying you suspect Miss Hanako is a demon? Yoshizuru Asato finally caught on to what the two had been discussing. He immediately jumped into the conversation and looked at Takeo. But you know as well as I do, demons can't appear during the daytime, and yet Asato trailed off and looked up at the sky. The sun now hung high in the sky, sunlight spilling across the ground. With the windows and doors of the house wide open, the rays streamed indoors as well. If Hanako were a demon, then with this much direct sunlight, she would have turned to ash as early as dawn. There was no way she could still be standing here. Takeo quietly turned to Yoshizuru Asato and said, "What if she's connected to a demon?" Asato's eyes widened at the suggestion. As the sun gradually sank in the west, another day came to an end. After a busy day, Taniguchi Hanako shut the front entrance of her home, raised and secured the wooden panels that served as shutters for the storefront, and finally returned to the house through the back door. But the moment she stepped inside, she saw Takeo, Asato, and Sakuma Iori fully equipped and ready to head out. Hanako paused in surprise. Her eyes swept over the three of them before finally landing on Yoshizuru Asato. "Sir Yoshizuru, what's going on?" "Oh, we've located the demon that's been attacking people in the area. We're heading out to eliminate it. Thank you so much for your hospitality these past few days, Miss Hanako, we truly appreciate it." Yoshizuru Asato spoke with sincerity and gave her a respectful bow. At his words, Hanako's body gave a slight tremble. Even her breathing grew a little rapid. After a few seconds, she finally responded, asking in a low voice, You really found the demon?" "It's just some traces for now," Takeo interjected with a smile. "But if we follow the trail, we should be able to track it down." "Hanako-san, are you alright? Are you feeling unwell?" The red-haired boy had intended to continue explaining, but upon seeing Hanako's expression, he quickly shifted to asking with concern. Hanako took 2 deep breaths to calm herself, then forced a smile and said, It's nothing." "Are you leaving now?" "Yes," Takeo replied. Hanako inhaled once more, her voice trembling as she said, "Then, let me see you off." No one objected. Hanako escorted the 3 of them to the front gate. She stood by the doorway, waving as she watched them depart. Their figures gradually receded into the distance, slowly vanishing into the evening mist. Hanako stood there blankly, staring in the direction they had gone. Only after their silhouettes disappeared entirely did she suddenly snap out of it. Without even bothering to shut the door behind her, she turned and ran off in another direction. Her footsteps were hurried. Very hurried. _____________________ 1 to advance chapters P@Trian/Horny FBI chapter 49, because, he's my. The weather tonight wasn't good. Perhaps because the past few days had been nothing but clear skies, the moisture in the air had built up to its limit. By late evening, the sky was already filled with dark clouds. It looked like rain was coming. Under the gloomy sky, the town, already nearing nightfall, appeared even dimmer. Hanako was running through those shadowed streets. She ignored the light rain that had already begun to fall and paid no mind to the encroaching darkness of the evening. Wearing cloth shoes, she dashed along the dirt and stone roads. Just as she left the outskirts of town, the rain began in earnest. At first it was a drizzle, then a steady downpour, and finally it turned into a torrential storm. The heavy rain soaked Hanako's clothes and drenched her hair. Yet she didn't care. She messily wiped the rain from her face and kept running, firm and determined, toward a certain direction. She didn't know how long she had been running. Huff. 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 Only when she finally came to a stop did she realize how far she had gone. She stopped in front of a deep, deep pit, then collapsed to her knees at its edge and shouted downward, "Brother!" Her voice echoed through the hollow below, but the rain muffled the sound, making the echo dull and faint. When there was no response from within the pit, Hanako grew even more anxious. She shouted once again into the hole, "Brother! Stop yelling!" At last, her call was answered. But what made Hanako's heart skip a beat was that the voice hadn't come from inside the pit, it had come from above. She turned and looked up toward the trees. Atop a large tree beside the pit sat a man whose hair was longer than his body, trailing all the way down from the branches to the ground. The man's features bore some resemblance to Hanako's, but on his forehead grew a horn, something only demons possessed. His eyes were a stark red and black, and his grotesque fangs were bared in full view. This was no human. He was a demon. "Brother, how did you get out?" Seeing him, Hanako's voice trembled, not knowing if it was from the cold of the rain or from fear as she questioned him. The demon extended his long tongue and licked the rain off his soaked arm, then grinned with a wicked smile, "You haven't brought me food in days. I got hungry, so of course I had to come out and look for something to eat. Hey, my dear little sister, these past few days, why didn't you come?" The demon's red and black eyes stared fixedly at Hanako. Though he called Hanako little sister with his words, the look in his eyes was filled with a ravenous hunger, as if he were staring at food. If it weren't raining, Hanako might have even seen the drool dripping from his mouth. But she didn't notice any of that. Instead, she shouted loudly to warn him, "Demon slayers! Brother, you have to run. Demon slayers came, 3 of them. You're no match for them." "Demon slayers? Ah, them." The demon seemed to remember something. When Kibutsuji Muzan had turned him into a demon, a portion of Muzan's blood had passed on memories as well, memories that told him about the Demon Slayer Corps, and that he must avoid their members at all costs. In addition to that, there was also an order, to search for the blue spider lily. But this demon had never seen the blue spider lily, nor did he have any idea how to search for it. Still, those concerns could be dealt with later. As he thought, the look he gave Hanako grew increasingly dangerous. This girl, gulp. The demon had already lost all memory of her. After becoming a demon, it seemed he had forgotten everything from his past. When he had first transformed, the very first people he saw aside from that man were this girl before him. The girl had called him brother, and while something inside him had stirred faintly at the time, that feeling had been quickly drowned out by hunger. He was starving. He wanted to eat. He wanted to devour this girl. So he had attacked her. Unfortunately for him, the girl was lucky and he was not. She had run to the edge of a pit. The demon, driven purely by hunger and lacking rational thought, had slipped and fallen into it. And so, he ended up trapped. A newly born demon only had strength and speed slightly greater than a normal human. A few people working together could subdue one. That meant he had no way of escaping from the smooth-walled, natural pit. Fortunately, there had been a small sheltered area at the bottom that blocked out the sunlight, otherwise, he would have been burned to ash the next morning when the sun rose. Even so, if nothing unexpected had happened, he would have just remained at the bottom of the pit, waiting to die. But unfortunately there was a woman with a few screws loose who believed he was her older brother. Haha. Maybe this woman really had convinced herself he was her brother. When she learned that he needed to eat humans to survive, she had actually brought someone and right in front of him pushed that person into the pit. From that day on, this demon began living a life of being fed by the woman. Though she didn't come on a fixed schedule, and each time she only brought one person, he had to admit being able to stay put and have food delivered to him was quite convenient. So, the demon accepted this woman and treated her as his little sister. Up until now. Truthfully, this demon never really believed the woman was his sister. After all, they weren't even the same species anymore. Why should he think of her that way? Still, there was a strange feeling and urge to protect her that lingered inside him. That feeling disgusted him, and at the same time, he kind of wanted to get rid of her. But she kept bringing him food, so he couldn't bring himself to just discard her. Though now it seemed he didn't need to worry about that anymore. Ah! Demon slayers, huh, yeah, they are scary. The long-haired demon spoke in a low, gravelly voice. But with the overwhelming sound of the rain and even thunder rumbling in the distance, Hanako didn't quite catch what he said. She called out anxiously, "Brother! You have to run." "Run? Sure." The long-haired demon grinned, revealing sharp teeth as he smiled at Hanako. Seeing that he seemed to understand her warning, Hanako also smiled in relief, but the next moment, her smile froze. Swoosh! The demon's hair suddenly shot out like living serpents, extending and twisting with unnatural life, wrapping tightly around Hanako and pinning her in place. The sudden turn of events left Hanako stunned. She stared in disbelief at her brother, confusion flooding her eyes. Huh? Be brother? She couldn't understand why he was doing this. Until the demon spoke for himself. "Before I run, let me feast first." The long-haired demon let out a vicious grin, drawing his hair back as he lunged at Hanako. His hair wrapped tighter around her, pulling her toward his gaping mouth, but just at that critical moment, amid the torrential downpour, a different kind of light suddenly flashed through the rain. Water-breathing, third form. A young girl's figure darted through the rain, trailing shimmering streaks of water. That watery light surged forward at high speed, rushing straight toward the demon, dancing among the strands of his hair. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the demon's supposedly indestructible hair was sliced clean through, falling to the ground in tattered clumps, beaten down by the pounding rain. Flowing dance. Sakuma Iora's figure appeared in front of Hanako. As Hanako fell, she was swiftly caught by two others rushing in, Takeo and Yoshizuru Asato. They gently lowered the unconscious Hanako to the ground, then turned with Iora to face the demon high in the tree. The long-haired demon's red and black pupils contracted when he saw how easily Sakuma Iori had torn through his hair. In the next instant, countless strands of hair surged back into motion, twisting together into a hardened needle-like spear that shot straight toward Iori. The sound of clashing metal rang out through the rain as Sakuma Iora barely managed to deflect the incoming attack. Just as she was about to counter, she looked up and saw that the long-haired demon's figure had already vanished into the downpour. "Hey! Don't you dare run!" Seeing her prey flee, Sakuma Iora shouted and immediately gave chase. The demon wasn't particularly powerful. Sakuma Iori alone was more than enough to handle him, so neither Takeo nor Yoshizuru Asato followed right away. Instead, they turned their attention to the rescued Hanako. Her clothes had long been soaked through by the rain, and after running all that way, her legs and body were covered in mud. Yet she didn't seem to care in the slightest. She simply stared in confusion toward the direction the demon had escaped. Yoshizuru Asato was silent for a moment before suddenly asking, "Miss Hanako, why did you do it?" "Why?" Hanako turned to look at him, her voice almost instinctive, as she replied, "Because he's my brother." He was also the only family she had left in this world. Underscore 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 O 1-2 Advanced Chapters Part-3/Horny FBI Chapter 50, 50, Is There No God? Sometimes, a peaceful life can be shattered by unexpected disaster. Hanako came to truly understand the meaning of that phrase on a winter evening nearly 4 months ago. She remembered it clearly. It was the middle of winter, and her brother had gone out to buy thread for weaving, but hadn't returned even after it got late. Worried that something might have happened to him, Hanako couldn't help but go out in search of him. She followed the path he usually took, hoping to find some trace of him. Fortunately, she did find her brother. Unfortunately, the brother she found, had turned into something else entirely. His eyes were wild and beast-like, no longer holding even a trace of the warmth or kindness he once had. When he saw Hanako, he seemed to be trying to restrain himself, but he couldn't hold back for long and lunged at her. Hanako instinctively dodged, and then ran purely out of instinct. She was lucky. While fleeing, she spotted a pit covered in snow. Being lighter on her feet, she made it across. But the long-haired demon, he wasn't so lucky. His heavier body slipped, and he fell straight into the pit. The cold weather had frozen the rock walls of the pit, making them even more slick, and the demon was unable to climb back out right away. It was only then that Hanako finally realized what had actually happened. She didn't know about the existence of demons. She simply thought her brother had fallen ill. She wanted to find a doctor, but she also feared that if the townspeople discovered what her brother had become, they would kill him. Worry, fear, confusion, and helplessness. All these emotions crashed down on Hanako's heart, leaving her paralyzed, not knowing what to do. And then, her brother said he was hungry. He said he wanted to eat people. Out of fear that he might starve to death, Hanako, after days, maybe over a dozen days of inner turmoil, finally did something she never thought she would do in her entire life. She lured a thug who had tried to force himself on her to the pit, and pushed him in. That was the first time Hanako had ever killed someone. And once that line was crossed, it became impossible to stop. After that initial hesitation, Hanako became more and more practiced. She began walking through dim alleys in the evening on purpose. She intentionally drew the attention of men with bad intentions. Thugs, scoundrels then used the same method, bringing them here and pushing them in, one by one, to fill her brother's stomach. Hanako knew what she was doing was wrong, that she shouldn't be doing it. But she couldn't stop. All she could do was cling to a fragile hope, that once her brother had eaten enough people, he would return to the way he used to be. To the brother who protected her, cherished her, and treated her with warmth and kindness. But a few days ago, Yoshizuru Isato's arrival shattered that illusion. Demons are cruel, merciless creatures. Once someone becomes a demon, there's no turning back. The only way to release them is to kill them. That's why I'm here to slay demons. That's what the demon slayer, Yoshizuru Isato, had told her. Only then did Hanako finally realize what her brother had become and awaken from the dream she had stubbornly clung to. But she didn't dare confess the truth to Isato. Because even so, she still couldn't bring herself to let go of her brother. "Miss Hanako, I told you before," Isato shouted, gripping her shoulders. "Once someone becomes a demon, there's no way to turn them back. Death is the only release for them. So why did you then? What was I supposed to do?" Hanako broke down, crying and screaming, "He's my brother. He's the only family I have. What else could I do? Tell me." Her shoulders shook violently. "He used to braid my hair when I was little, do you know that?" she sobbed. "He learned it from Mom before she died. He'd sit there patiently, even when I cried or threw a tantrum, and say, 'There, there. Big brother's here.'" Her voice broke completely. Why did this happen to us? What did we do to deserve this? My brother, he raised me. He gave up his youth, his freedom, his studies, his life just to protect me after Mom and Dad died. He used to say, he'd never let me be alone." Hanako collapsed to the ground, falling to her knees as she cried uncontrollably. Her fingers clawed at the earth, nails packed with dirt. Yoshizuru Isato watched the scene, unable to say a single word. Takeo, recalling the moment just earlier when the long-haired demon had tried to devour Hanako, said softly, "Miss Hanako, that thing. It's no longer your brother. Once a person becomes a demon, they completely lose their humanity." That was something Kyojuro Rengoku had taught Takeo, a truth, a piece of knowledge. No matter who they were before, whether a sibling, a dear friend, or a loved one, once someone becomes a demon, they lose all reason. They devour the very people closest to them. Perhaps after a long, long time, after consuming enough humans and gaining sufficient strength, some demons might recover fragments of memories from when they were human. But by then, the people they killed would still be dead. The ones they ate could never return. A demon is a demon. They can never become human again. Takeo hadn't always understood this. He had encountered too few demons himself. There was even a time he thought maybe there were exceptions. Just like how there were good and bad people among humans, maybe there were also good demons and bad demons. But now, after witnessing the person who was once Hanako's brother actually try to harm her with his own hands, all of Takeo's former illusions were completely shattered. At the same time, he came to a deeper, more painful understanding of what demons truly were. Wahahaha. That's my brother. We had no one, but we didn't beg. We worked and worked and worked, day and night, completing those orders to better our futures through hard work. Then, why did this happen to us? She screamed to the sky. Why did he have to become a monster? Why was it him? Not someone else. Why? Is there no God? Her voice cracked into a wail so raw it silenced even the rain. Her anguish seemed to pour from her very soul, a sound born from shattered hope and a love that could no longer be returned. I just wanted him back. Just once. To hear him say my name, with affection. Like he used to. She curled forward, arms wrapped around her head, her body trembling uncontrollably. Asato stood frozen. And Takeo, watching this girl, who had done the unforgivable yet for reasons heartbreakingly human, could say nothing at all. Right now, Takeo had only one goal, to slay the long-haired demon who had escaped. He took a deep breath and focused on the distant flashes of Iora's blade in the rain. Then, he spoke quietly to Asato, I'm going to support Iora. I'll leave Miss Hanako to you. Why yet? Asato replied in a low voice and silently remained at Hanako's side, protecting her. And then, Takeo's figure quickly vanished into the curtain of rain. Sakuma Iora's growth had been rapid. In the month since they last saw each other, her strength had noticeably increased. Perhaps it was due to being driven by the pressure of keeping up with Takeo. Whatever the reason, despite facing a demon who had already awakened his blood demon art, his hair whipping and lashing like deadly whips, Sakuma Iora showed no sign of being overwhelmed. Precisely because of that, the long-haired demon hadn't managed to flee far. He was being held in place by Sakuma Iora. Damn it! You filthy girl! Don't think I'm actually afraid of you. Realizing that escape was no longer possible, and with a second demon slayer now arriving, the demon lashed out in frustration. His hair flew behind him and twisted together into over a dozen long, blood-red needles. Blood demon art, chaos needle technique. Each strand of hair had been hardened to the strength of metal. All at once, the needles shot toward both Iora and Takeo. Iora responded instantly with her strongest technique, water breathing, third form, while Takeo drew his Nichiren sword and assumed a very different stance. Wolf breathing, Takeo's own original breathing style, wolf breathing, gave him the presence of a standing, humanoid wolf cub, exuding a primal and dangerous aura. Wind blades curled around his sword, and in the instant the needles closed in, they exploded outward, taking the form of giant wolves. The wind wolves lunged forward, shredding the incoming hair needles to pieces. Third form, Wolf Hunt. Unlike the first form's rapid and aggressive double strike, and the second form's reckless, all-out piercing assault that abandoned defense, the third form was designed specifically for large-scale combat, multi-directional, sweeping attacks perfect for handling enemies who relied on numbers. The gusts generated by the blade moved like a pack of wolves on the hunt, launching relentless, tearing strikes at their prey. That was why this move was called Wolf Hunt, the coordinated assault of a wolf pack. After shredding the demon's hair in one blow, Takeo didn't pause. He twisted his blade, feet planted firmly on the muddy ground, eyes locking onto the demon's neck as his breathing centered and focused. Wolf breathing, fourth form, his body shot forward like lightning through the rain, trailing mist that was quickly scattered by the storm. In an instant, Takeo was already in front of the demon, who had just raised his guard in an attempt to defend. A flash of his gleaming blade cut through the downpour, accompanied by the faint, haunting echo of a wolf's howl, and in the blink of an eye, the demon's head flew into the air, spinning through the rain. Wolf strike in the mist. Takeo murmured the name of the fourth form softly as the demon's severed head hit the ground. Thud. Underscore 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 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3 / Horny FBI Chapter 51, 51, The Last Embrace. When the demon's head hit the ground, he still hadn't realized what had happened. Only when he could no longer sense his body did he finally become aware of his condition. Ah, ah, ah. Damn it. Damn it all. Now reduced to just a head, the long-haired demon began screaming wildly. Perhaps it was unwillingness, or maybe something else, but his head wasn't disintegrating right away. Its dissolution was unusually slow, leaving him enough time to rant, "That damn woman. It's all her fault. If she hadn't brought you people here, how could I possibly?" "Shut up." His furious complaints pushed Sakuma over the edge. She shouted at the demon, "Even after you turned into a demon, Miss Hanako still protected you. What right do you have to blame her?" "Protect me? I didn't need her protection. If I had known it would turn out like this, I should have just eaten her last time she came. Instead of waiting until now." The demon kept spewing his resentment, seemingly genuinely enraged. But the one who had slain him, Takeo, stood there calmly, watching. After the outburst, he slowly asked, "Would you really have eaten her?" "Of course brother." The long-haired demon had just opened his mouth to respond, but a heart-wrenching scream cut him off mid-sentence. He turned toward the voice, and when he saw that familiar figure, the speed of his disintegration seemed to slow, just a little. For the first time, in those red and black demon eyes, a different light flickered, something not belonging to a demon. Ah! Ha! And Ko? It was as if something had flipped a switch. The memories that had long been sealed away suddenly burst forth, breaking through the dam and flooding his mind. In that moment, the demon finally remembered who she was, who he was. But it was already too late. "Brother! No, no, don't go, please, brother." Hanako ran to where his head had fallen. She knelt and cradled his severed head in her arms, holding it close to her chest as she wailed in agony. Her tears mixed with the rain. It was no longer clear what was rainwater and what was sorrow. "Hanako! I now remember." The demon looked up at his sister, now weeping uncontrollably. His eyes trembled. What have I done?" He wanted, just like in the past, to comfort her, to reach out, stroke her head, and say, "Don't cry, Hanako. Your big brother is here." But in the end, he couldn't say anything at all. The disintegration could not be stopped. A demon slain by a Nichiren sword would vanish, just as if they'd been exposed to sunlight, inevitably, and completely. The long-haired demon knew. He was dying. Before dying, he had countless things he wanted to say to his sister. But in the end, as memories of the past flooded back, all those countless words condensed into a single sentence. "Hanako. Brother. I'm sorry." The long-haired demon finally shed tears that slid down his face, though it was unclear if they were from regret or sorrow. Those tears became the last traces he left in this world. And then, he turned to ash, fading away in the rain. The downpour, now without anything to stop it, fell freely into Hanako's open hands. As she felt the cold droplets, she finally realized what had just happened. But she didn't scream. She didn't sob or collapse. Instead, she knelt there like her soul had vanished, her body still, like a lifeless statue. The three demon slayers stood nearby, silently watching. Takeo looked at the scene before him and let out a quiet sigh. This was, probably the first time he had truly witnessed such a painful, irreversible parting between loved ones. What he'd seen in films or on TV didn't count. Until now, Takeo hadn't fully grasped the depth of tragedy demons brought. When he had first crawled out of that grave, the Kamado family had already been killed by demons. And the first demon he ever faced, hadn't actually managed to kill anyone. Back when he and NieR had fought the bandage-wrapped demon woman, Takeo had only vaguely guessed that something tragic had happened in her past, but he never truly knew the details. Only now, with Hanako and her brother's story unfolding fully before his eyes, did it become painfully real. It didn't just deepen his understanding of what demons were, it also taught Takeo something else: the appearance of demons only ever brings sorrow and pain. And what demon slayers are meant to do, is to slay every demon they encounter. To put an end to that pain and sorrow. Yoshizuru Asato stood beside Takeo, staring at Hanako's back. He looked like he wanted to say something, lips parted, but before he could speak, Hanako moved. After kneeling silently on the ground for who knew how long, Hanako finally stood up. She walked toward the remnants left behind by her brother. There, on the ground, was a cloak, something she had given him during the winter to keep warm. Now, it was all that was left of him. Hanako stepped forward, picked up the cloak, wrung out the water, folded it carefully, and tucked it away. Then, with a gentle smile of quiet release, she looked at the cloak and said, "Let's go home, brother." "Miss Hanako." Asato looked at her with worry in his eyes. Hanako turned at the sound of the voice. She faced the group and bowed deeply. "Thank you. Thank you for giving him peace. I deep down actually knew, after he became like that he could never come back. But she had still clung to a sliver of hope." That part, Hanako didn't say aloud. She simply remained bent in a deep bow, and only after a long pause did she straighten and say, "I'm going home now. I wish you all safety and strength in your battles." "Miss Hanako, let us escort you back," Asato offered gently. Hanako shook her head. "No need. Please, just let me be alone for a while." Her brother had just been killed, and the ones who had slain him were the demon slayers standing before her. How could she possibly face them calmly? Asato understood that well. So he didn't insist. He simply reminded her to be careful, and silently watched as she walked away. Shhhh. After Hanako's departure, the sound of rain grew lighter. At some point, the downpour had become a drizzle. Takeo looked up at the dark, overcast sky, then finally turned to Asato and asked, "What about the other missing people?" "What do you mean, what about them?" Asato asked, confused. Takeo explained, "It's true the demon was the one who devoured them, but the one who brought them here was Miss Hanako. That makes her an accomplice, so I'm asking, should we report this to the local authorities?" What happened to Hanako was certainly tragic, yes. But tragedy didn't erase responsibility. Sympathy couldn't justify endangering the lives of others. Originally, Takeo hadn't planned to interfere. As a member of the Demon Slayer Corps, his duty was to slay demons, nothing more. But he hadn't forgotten the request from the Akita family. Their son, Tojiro, had asked him to find his older brother. Now, it was clear that Tojiro could no longer be found, yet no matter what, there had to be an explanation. Yoshizuru Asato was quiet for a moment after hearing that. He scratched at his rain-soaked hair and said, "All right, how about this, let's talk to Miss Hanako later and ask her to turn herself in." "Fine by me." Takeo had no objections. If Hanako turned herself in, the Akita family would at least get closure even if it was a tragic one. The two of them planned to go speak with Hanako after a short while, but Sakuma Iori, who had been standing nearby, spoke up with a different take. I'm telling you two, if you're planning to go see that Hanako lady, you'd better go now. How come? Takeo turned to her. Iori hesitated for a moment, just about to respond when Yoshizuru Asato suddenly realized something. He immediately shot to his feet and ran toward Hanako's home. Takeo and Iori exchanged a look, then followed right after him. The three of them moved at full speed, quickly making their way back to Hanako's house. But as they neared the home, a faint scent of blood in the air made Takeo's heart sink. Asato didn't have Takeo's keen sense of smell, but he was ahead of them. He rushed straight into the house to look for Hanako. And he found her. But he would have preferred not to have found her. Because there, lying beside the wall of the room, was Taniguchi Hanako. A pair of scissors had been driven straight through her flesh. Blood poured endlessly from the wound, pooling beneath her on the floor. Even in that final moment, Hanako was tightly clutching something in her arms, the coat. The only thing her brother had left behind. ________________ 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3/Horny FBI Chapter 52. Together, always. Hanako once had a happy family. She had a father who cared for her, a mother who cherished her, and an older brother who always protected her. When she was a little girl, Hanako believed she was the happiest person in the world. Even though their family was poor, so poor they sometimes couldn't afford enough charcoal in the winter, she still felt content and blessed. But that happiness disappeared when Hanako was 7. Her father was killed by bandits while out buying silk. Her mother, whose health had always been frail, fell seriously ill shortly after. In the end, she didn't survive the winter. All Hanako had left was her brother. It's all right, Hanako. I'll protect you. I'll always protect you. After their mother's funeral, her brother embraced her and whispered that promise in her ear. Taniguchi Ida kept that promise. With a body only slightly older and larger than Hanako's, he shielded her from all the hardships of the world. That small, fragile body held up an entire household. One of Hanako's deepest memories was the time she had tried to ease her brother's burden by going out on her own to buy thread. She hadn't told him and she didn't know the way. So, naturally, she got lost. It was early autumn then, and the nights had already begun to grow cold. Taniguchi Hanako wandered along the small path for a long time until she was cold and hungry, finally curling up under a large tree. She thought she might die there. But in the end, Ida found her. When her brother found her, he didn't scold her. He didn't get angry. He simply draped a coat over her shivering body, then carried her ankles already raw and her body exhausted on his back, walking home in silence. That quiet kindness left Hanako unsure how to react. She had been so afraid her brother would hate her for what she'd done. Through sobs, she cried out her apology. I am sorry, Oni-chan. I just wanted to help you, sob. I'm sorry. It's okay. Her brother's gentle voice came as always, my Hanako is amazing. You saw that I was tired and wanted to help, that's something I understand very well. You just weren't ready yet. You got a little lost, that's all. There's nothing to apologize for. It's okay. Brother, you're not mad at me. Haha, with such a sweet and thoughtful little sister, how could I ever be mad at you? But, next time you go out, make sure to bring a map, okay? Taniguchi Ida's voice was gentle. That warmth from her brother slowly melted away Hanako's fear and anxiety. In a small, timid voice, tinged with curiosity, she asked, then, what if I get lost again? I'll come find you, Ida said firmly. No matter how many times you get lost, no matter where you are, I'll find you. That was another promise her brother made to her. And that moment became etched deeply in Hanako's memory. Why am I remembering that now? Standing in a space of endless, unknown darkness, Taniguchi Hanako thought back on that day, silently asking herself. But the moment the question left her heart, she already knew the answer. Hanako looked up at the shadowy void around her and murmured, "I'm lost again." Yes. She was lost. She didn't know where this place was, didn't know which way she was supposed to go. No, perhaps even before this moment, she had already been lost. When she accidentally caused Toichiro's death. When she lured those people to feed her brother. When she chose not to report it to the authorities after her brother became a demon. She had already lost her way. And this time, there was no one to lead her back. Where was this place? Was it the world after death? Hanako wondered silently, then picked a direction and began walking. But she hadn't gone far before she heard a familiar voice, "Don't come any closer." She snapped her head up. Beyond a dark boundary line, deep in the blackest part of the void, Taniguchi Ida stood, his face filled with both anger and panic as he shouted toward her, "Don't come here. Go back. Now. Brother." Hanako's eyes lit up with hope. She didn't care what he was saying, she ran toward him with all her might. But as she approached, Taniguchi Ida grew even more frantic. "This isn't where you belong. You have to go back. Brother." Hanako ignored everything. She crossed the boundary line, threw her arms around Ida's neck, and held him tightly, refusing to let go. Ida struggled to push her back, panicked and shouting, "What are you doing, Hanako? Do you even realize, do you even understand what's happening right now?" "I know." Hanako cut him off. "I know everything. But I'm not going back. And I'm not going to the other side either. I won't be separated from you again. Don't say something so stupid. I've eaten so many people. I'm going to hell, Hanako. You can't follow me there. Then I'll go with you." Hanako shouted, her voice unwavering. There wasn't the slightest trace of hesitation in her eyes. She clung to her brother even tighter, choking on her sobs as she cried out, "I don't want to be apart from you. If you're not there, I'll get lost. I won't be able to find my way home. So I won't leave you again." Hanako wept bitterly. She understood that if she turned around and left now, maybe, just maybe, Ida would bear all the sin alone. Maybe, she could even come back to life. But not for a moment did she consider leaving. A world without her brother, a world without any family, that kind of world held no meaning for Hanako. So even if it meant going to hell, she would go with him. They would be together, always. Never apart again. Holding his little sister in his arms, feeling the searing warmth and sincerity in her embrace, Taniguchi Ida found himself unable to say another word to stop her. At last, he held her close just like he used to when they were small. Tears ran down his face as he cried in anguish, whispering apologies over and over, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Hanako. I'm so sorry." He was sorry for becoming a demon. He was sorry for eating people. He was sorry for forgetting her. Hurting you in the end. "I'm so sorry." Ida had countless apologies he wanted to say. But in the end, none of them came out. He just kept repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." At some point, cold snowflakes began to fall around them. Endless snow, carrying a deathly chill that could freeze a person solid, drifted down upon them. It blanketed the ground at their feet, settled on their shoulders, and sealed off every path around them. Even if Hanako were to let go of her brother now, she probably wouldn't be able to leave this frozen world. But she didn't regret it. She never would. She simply held him tightly. Even in death, she wouldn't let go. Taniguchi Ida gently pulled back, then wiped the tears from Hanako's face, just like he had all those years ago when she'd gotten lost. Then, he took her hand and said softly, "Let's go, Hanako." Hanako nodded firmly. She didn't look at the snow and ice that terrified her. She simply held tight to the hand wrapped around hers. And together, hand in hand, the two of them walked forward into the endless snowfall. Into the hell that awaited to pass judgment on them. ________________ 12 Advanced Chapters Part-3/Horny FBI Chapter 53, Final Conclusion and New Mission. Hanako was dead. It was the natural outcome. Her chest had been pierced by scissors, her heart fatally wounded. A human suffering such an injury, unless it was someone like Takeo, would be left with no chance of survival. The three members of the Demon Slayer Corps stood before Hanako's body. Yoshizuru Asato was silent for a long time before he finally stepped forward and gently closed her eyes. "Is it over now?" Sakuma Iora looked at Hanako's lifeless body and quietly asked. The demon had been slain. Hanako, who had aided the demon, had met the fate that awaited her. It seemed like everything had come to an end. At the very least, Takeo's mission was complete. Outside, it was still the middle of the night. Because Takeo had killed the long-haired demon so swiftly, barely any time had passed. The town was still shrouded in darkness. Many people were still lost in sleep. And after the heavy downpour, the clouds in the sky had finally dispersed. A beautiful moon peeked out from behind them, casting pale silver light from above, shining gently upon Hanako's home and upon Hanako herself. Bathed in moonlight, Takeo saw a faint smile on her face. In her final moments, what had she thought of? Whom had she seen? Had she felt any remorse for those who had died because of her? Had she regretted what happened to Toichiro? Takeo didn't know the answers to those questions, and to him, it didn't matter. He simply stepped forward and tore off a strip of fabric from Hanako's sleeve, holding it in his hand. Sakuma Iori, puzzled by his actions, asked, "What are you doing?" "Tojiro, the younger brother of Toichiro, asked me to find out what happened to his brother. Now that I've found the answer, I need to give him closure." Takeo spoke quietly. No matter what the outcome was, a promise once made shouldn't be forgotten. Even if the truth was cruel, Takeo believed Tojiro deserved to know it. They couldn't just leave Hanako's body there. But the three of them had no authority to handle the remains, nor the time to prepare a proper burial. They would be leaving soon. In the end, Yoshizuru Asato decided to first make sure Hanako's body was respectfully arranged. Then, he would anonymously report the incident to the local authorities, and find someone who had known Hanako to assist with the burial. That would be the final conclusion to the story. And so, by dawn the next morning, the three of them split up to carry out their assigned tasks. Asato went to notify the local officials. Iori went to find someone who had been close to Hanako. As for Takeo, he went to the Akita residence. There, he found Tojiro, the one who had asked him to find his brother. And in silence, he handed Tojiro the strip of fabric from Hanako's sleeve. At the same time, Takeo told him the truth. After hearing everything that had happened, Tojiro didn't say a word. He just stood there, crying. Then, between sobs, he began to speak about his brother Toichiro and Hanako. Toichiro had liked Hanako. But sometimes, he had a bit of a temper. After Hanako's brother went missing, Toichiro had gone to her, asking her to marry him. Perhaps, on the night Toichiro left home, he went to see Hanako again. And somewhere along the way, something happened, something that led Hanako to misunderstand his intentions. So she brought him to the long-haired demon. And just like that, tragedy struck. To Tojiro, his brother might have been a good person. Maybe even Toichiro himself had no ill intent. But to Hanako, who had no family left, reality had forced her to be cautious. Not to mention, she still had to take care of her brother, who had turned into a demon. Tojiro's brother must have fit her criteria of victims. So on that night when Toichiro came looking for her, his fate was likely already sealed. In the end, Tojiro thanked Takeo. He returned home, still weeping. Whether or not he would share the truth with their father, no one knew. But that was no longer Takeo's concern. Having fulfilled Tojiro's request, Takeo finally made his way to the edge of town. Outside the village, Yoshizuru Sato and Sakuma Iori had already been waiting for quite some time. "You two, finished already?" Seeing the two of them there ahead of him snacking on some rain-soaked rice crackers that Iori had apparently brought, Takeo was visibly surprised. He had assumed he'd be the fastest to finish. After all, his task was simple: report to Tojiro. But Asato and Iori? They had to find people and explain everything. And if someone misunderstood and thought they had killed Hanako, they might have even had to run for it. Yet somehow, they'd finished ahead of him. Munch munch munch. Well, we, munch munch, didn't have to show our faces, Asato explained, cheeks puffed out as he chewed. After swallowing, he turned to Iori and added, "Sakuma, your cooking's not bad at all. Right? It's a family recipe." Sakuma Iori boasted proudly, arms on her hips, nose held so high it was practically pointed at the sky. Takeo thought that if she had a tail, it'd be wagging so hard it'd fly off. Ignoring the tail wagging Iori, Takeo turned toward Asato and asked, "Everything okay with the local officials? They're not going to mistreat Hanako's remains, right?" "They won't," Asato replied. "Hanako got along well with most people. A few of her neighbors are willing to handle her burial." Sakuma already confirmed it. Ideally, the Demon Slayer Corps themselves should have taken care of Hanako's remains. After all, she was indirectly responsible for several deaths. If any of the victims' families learned the truth, they might not treat her grave kindly. But they had no choice. They were demon slayers, they couldn't stay in one place for long. Besides, they already had their next mission waiting. Just as Takeo was thinking that, a Kazhigai crow came flying toward them from the horizon. This one had a small headband tied around its head. It was Yoshizuru Sato's crow. The moment it landed, it began squawking in its sharp, urgent voice, "Dust Mountain. Trouble on Dust Mountain. Yoshizuru Sato. Kamado Takeo. And the lost girl Sakuma Iori. Proceed immediately to Dust Mountain. Urgent dispatch to Dust Mountain. Urgent. Urgent. Urgent." At the sound of the crow's panicked cry, all three of them instantly tensed, their expressions turning grim. Asato stuffed the last bits of his rice cracker into his mouth and looked at the others. "Let's go. Time to move out." "Wait a minute. Dust Mountain wasn't that supposed to be my assignment?" Sakuma Iori suddenly remembered. That was where she had originally been headed, but because she'd gotten lost, she had stopped in this town temporarily. But now, it seemed something had gone wrong there. "If the Kazhigai crow is giving the order to all three of us now, it means this is no longer a solo assignment," Yoshizuru Sato replied. "When a mission required multiple slayers, the Corps would send a single message to all relevant parties. If the crow had summoned three of them at once, it meant this mission would need more than just Iori to handle it." And thinking about the team that had already been sent ahead to Dust Mountain, Asato had a very bad feeling. So did Takeo. He frowned and looked up at the Kazhigai crow. "What happened to the team that went to Dust Mountain earlier?" "Missing. They've gone missing. You must provide backup. Hurry. Hurry. Hurry." The Kazhigai crow shrieked in its high, urgent tone, but none of the three found it annoying. They were all too shaken by the news it had delivered. A team led by a Kinu-ranked demon slayer, with at least 4 supporting members, had vanished, on Dust Mountain? This place. Could it be? A 12 Kazuki is there? Chapter 54, have you ever seen a loved one die? Let's move. Yoshizuru Asato repeated, then turned, and began walking in the direction the Kajigai Crow had indicated. This time, his expression was deadly serious. Takeo had seen that look before when they fought the water demon. Asato had worn that same grim expression. Takeo and Sakuma Iora followed closely behind. As they walked, Takeo frowned, and spoke to Asato, so many demon slayers have gone missing, conservatively, we're likely dealing with a demon on par with the 12 Kizuki. Shouldn't we call for a Hashira? Demons of the 12 Kizuki were considered equivalent in strength to the Hashira themselves. And thinking about someone like Kyojuro Rengoku, Takeo knew full well he stood no chance alone against one of them. If there really was a 12 Kizuki hiding on Dust Mountain, and the three of them charged in recklessly, they'd just be feeding themselves to the slaughter. If it is a 12 Kizuki, then a Hashira is probably already on the way, Asato said firmly. But until they arrive, our job is to make sure it doesn't escape. Or even better, we kill it first. The Hashira weren't omnipresent. They each had territories to cover and couldn't respond instantly to every call. That's where the rank and file demon slayers came in. It was their time to fight. If it was just a demon slightly stronger than average, then they'd do their best to slay it, save the Hashira the trouble. But if it really was one of the 12 Kizuki, their mission was clear: hold it back at all costs. Even if it meant sacrificing their own lives. And yet, Yoshizuru Asato didn't hesitate in the slightest. Neither did Sakuma Iora. In fact, she cheerfully pulled out another rice cracker and handed it to Takeo with a grin. Want one? It's a little soggy, actually it's very soggy, but it still tastes fine, probably. Takeo silently accepted the rice cracker and followed the two of them. Truthfully, from his perspective, this was the kind of situation where they should wait for a Hashira to arrive and act together. That would be the safer, more reliable option. Charging in now was reckless. If it was one of the 12 Kizuki, Takeo could at least protect himself. But what about Asato and Iora? They weren't as strong as he was. They didn't have his regeneration or durability. Didn't they realize they were heading straight into a situation where they could die? Takeo wanted to ask. But before he could, Asato glanced back, as if sensing what was on his mind, and asked quietly, Takeo, you've never watched someone important to you die right in front of you, have you? Even though you said your family was killed by demons, you've already forgotten all that. So, you've never really seen someone important to you die right in front of your eyes, have you? Takeo couldn't answer Asato's question. Because he was right. In his previous life, Takeo was an orphan. He had no one important to lose, let alone witness their death firsthand. And in this life, the moment he regained his past life's memories was when he crawled out of a grave. As for the already deceased Kamado family, while he did feel some sorrow, it wasn't enough to make him weep bitterly over them. To him, this world still felt like just an anime world. A setting. So, just as Asato said, he had never truly experienced the pain of watching someone he cared about die. In a certain sense, he was still naive. But I have, Yoshizuru Asato said calmly. My father died right in front of me. He was eaten alive by a demon. And from that moment on, I made up my mind. No matter what kind of demon I face, I will never run. This time is no different. Most people who join the Demon Slayer Corps carried painful, tragic pasts. If their loved ones hadn't been killed by demons, they probably wouldn't have joined the Demon Slayer Corps either. Yoshizuru Asato was just one of many ordinary members of the Corps. His conviction was one shared by most of them. After hearing this, Takeo once again fell silent. He turned to look at Sakuma Iora, who was smiling as usual, wanting to say something but stopping himself. Iora blinked at him, then suddenly stepped forward and slung an arm around his shoulders, grinning cheerfully as she said, "What's wrong? You think I'm the same as our senpai? Don't worry, I'm super happy every day now. I'm not like him, all gloomy and serious. Ugh, talk about a downer, it's not even a good look. Hey, Sakuma. I can't just let that slide." Ehehe, Sakuma Iora laughed with zero remorse, but Yoshizuru Isato didn't seem to mind. He only acted angry on the surface, he wasn't actually upset by her teasing words. Takeo watched the exchange between the two and said nothing more. For someone who had never truly experienced loss, it was hard to understand the weight and meaning of it. Maybe, only when the day came that Takeo experienced that kind of pain for himself would he finally understand what Yoshizuru Isato meant. Because of last night's heavy rain, the roads had become extremely muddy, making travel somewhat difficult. On top of that, since they had been exposed to the rain last night, their outerwear might have been waterproof, but the inner layers were not. The rain had already seeped in through their collars, and if they didn't find a way to deal with it, it would be very uncomfortable. So before reaching Dust Mountain, the three of them found a concealed spot to tidy up a bit and took a short rest before continuing on their way. Dust Mountain wasn't far from their original location. Even with the short delay, they still arrived before sunset and had time to rest and prepare themselves. "This is the place," Yoshizuru Isato said, glancing at the flock of crows flying above the mountain. He turned to the other two and added, "The sun hasn't set yet. Demons won't come out during this time. Let's rest for a bit first. Once the sun goes down, we'll head in. Do you smell anything?" Sakuma Iora asked during their break, looking toward Takeo. Takeo shook his head. The heavy rain washed away all the scents. "I can't smell a thing. The downpour from the previous night really couldn't have come at a worse time. Though it hadn't lasted long, it was enough to completely erase any tracks or scents that should have been present on Dust Mountain. At this point, even if they brought a dog along, it probably wouldn't be able to catch the scent of the missing Demon Slayer Corps members, let alone Takeo. But it didn't matter if they couldn't smell anything. The three of them were going to enter the mountain to hunt demons anyway. As long as the demon hadn't fled, they were bound to encounter it. The only question was what had happened to the other missing demon slayers. As that thought crossed Takeo's mind, he looked up at the sky where the Kashigi crows had gathered. Many of those crows had belonged to the missing demon slayers. The fact that they hadn't returned to their masters suggested those masters were likely dead. "By the way, why is this place called Dust Mountain?" Sakuma Iori suddenly asked while they waited for the sun to set. Being the older and more experienced one, Yoshizuru Isato explained, "I heard it's because this mountain is usually covered in swirling dust all year round. That's why it's called Dust Mountain. It's only because of the recent rain that all the dust has settled. You can't tell what it usually looks like." "I see," Iora said with a look of realization. Then she added, "In that case, the rain actually did us a favor. If the mountain had really been covered in dust, our movements might have been up." Iori had originally wanted to say that since everyone used breathing techniques, if there were too much dust in the air, it could interfere with their breathing, so in a way, the heavy rain from last night had actually helped them. But as she thought of that, a sudden realization struck her. The Demon Slayer Corps members who had gone missing last night, did they disappear before the heavy rain, or after it? Could it be that, just like she was thinking now, their combat strength had been affected due to the airborne dust? The thought left Iora feeling conflicted. Her unease didn't last long. After some time had passed, Yoshizuru Isato stood up. He looked toward the setting sun, which had already dipped below the horizon, and took a deep breath. "It's time for us to move out." The sun had set. The time to hunt demons had arrived. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 55, underground labyrinth. The area around Dust Mountain was vast, and the mountain paths weren't particularly easy to traverse. After all, it seemed that not many people had been here before. Takeo pushed aside a thick patch of grass that was obstructing his view and finally arrived at a slightly more walkable trail. He sniffed the air lightly and furrowed his brow. He still couldn't smell anything. His nose was filled only with the scent of rain and vegetation, nothing else. Raising his head to look at the current sky, he gazed at the round, bright moon and felt somewhat more at ease. The only good news right now was that the weather tonight was nice. The moonlight wasn't obscured and spilled down to the ground, so visibility wouldn't be too limited. Otherwise, if it had been a crescent moon, it might not have been pitch black, but it would have been close enough. Takeo. How is it? Did you find anything? Asato's voice came from farther ahead. Having found no leads himself, he called out to Takeo. Takeo replied, no. What about your side? Can't even see a rat's shadow. Weird, did the demon already escape? Many demons would flee the moment the Demon Slayer Corps got involved. Once discovered, they usually changed locations quickly. The Demon Slayers had come here just last night to hunt this demon. If it wasn't a fool, it shouldn't still be lingering here unless it was a particularly arrogant one, or had some reason it couldn't leave. Takeo pondered while continuing his search. Just as he was about to shift directions, a sudden scream came from Yoshizuru Asato's direction. Ah! It was unmistakably Asato's voice. Upon hearing it, Takeo immediately dashed toward the source. At the same time, Sakuma Iori also arrived from the opposite direction. When they reached the location where Asato had been, they found a deep pit in the ground, just wide enough for one person to fall through. It was obvious Yoshizuru Asato had fallen in. Hey! Asato-senpai! Are you alright? Iori called down from above, her voice echoing through the hole. A moment later, Asato replied, I'm fine. But you two should come down and take a look. It's huge down here. A demon hiding underground. Takeo muttered, considering the possibility. He exchanged a glance with Iori, then the two of them jumped down one after the other. The pit wasn't very deep, less than 10 meters. For those trained in breathing techniques, it was no trouble at all. They landed and saw Asato standing ahead, holding a lit fire starter to illuminate the space. He was positioned at a crossroads, his expression serious as he examined the branching tunnels stretching in several directions. When Takeo and Iori joined him, Asato said grimly, these tunnels don't look like they formed naturally. A demon's doing? Takeo asked. Most likely. I'd say the demon is hiding somewhere in here, assuming it hasn't already fled. Asato's words left the three momentarily silent. The demon likely was hiding down here, but the problem lay in the branching tunnels ahead. Including the path they came from, there were 4 or 5 different routes. This was essentially an underground labyrinth. Trying to track down a demon in a place like this meant they had no choice but to split up. But splitting up was dangerous. If this demon was truly responsible for wiping out the team that came yesterday, then any one of them encountering it alone could spell disaster. All three of them were thinking the same thing. Then, Iori and Asato turned to look at Takeo. They didn't even need to say anything. Takeo knew what they wanted to ask. He twitched his nose slightly, then his expression turned serious as he said, I don't smell the demon, but one of the tunnels has a strong scent of blood coming from it. Maybe. Then what are we waiting for? Iori drew her sword without hesitation. Let's check it out. The smell of blood. Unlike the eager Iori, Asato's expression only grew more solemn. His brow furrowed, and a deep concern flickered in his eyes. Even if a demon were injured, they would normally heal quickly. There was no way the scent of blood would still linger after an entire day. So it wasn't hard to figure out what the source of the blood Takeo smelled might be. Asato clenched his fist and placed one hand on the hilt of his sword. He inhaled deeply through the thick, dusty air, glanced at the other two, and without a word, stepped into the tunnel where the scent of blood was strongest. The path ahead was narrow and winding. It was wide enough for one person to walk comfortably, but if two tried to move side by side, they'd be pressed together. So the three proceeded in single file. Asato led the group, carrying the only source of light, a small flame in a fire striker. Iora followed in the middle, while Takeo covered the rear. Take the left path. Now the right. Keep going straight. From the back, Takeo called out directions to Asato up front. The underground maze was full of branches and turns. Whoever had dug this must have spent considerable time. With so many intersecting paths, it would be easy to get completely lost. If Takeo weren't tracking the subtle scents left along the way, even finding their way back might have been impossible. They continued forward for a while, when suddenly, Asato stopped in his tracks. What is it, senpai? Iori, who had been just as cautious, asked upon seeing him halt. Asato didn't answer immediately. He crouched down and picked something up from the ground. As the firelight drew closer, the two behind him saw what he held and they fell silent. It was a torn piece of cloth. More precisely, it was a fragment of a Demon Slayer Corps uniform. There were slash marks across it. One particularly deep cut had nearly split the fabric in two, leaving only a thin strand still connecting it. The entire scrap was covered in dust. Just a light touch was enough to blacken one's fingertips. Asato held the fragment in his palm, exhaled softly, and tucked it away. Then he turned to Takeo and asked, "It's just ahead, isn't it?" "Yeah." The scent of blood had grown even stronger. At this point, it was overwhelmingly pungent to Takeo, nearly unbearable. If Asato and Iora focused, they could probably detect the iron tang in the air as well. However, the smell of dust in the air had thickened, far more intense than before. It had begun to drown out the blood scent. If the air ahead was like this all the way, even breathing might become a struggle. Takeo paused for a moment, glanced at the two in front of him, both only wearing standard Demon Slayer uniforms, then tore off a portion of his own haori and fashioned it into a makeshift mask. He handed the pieces over. "Before we go any farther, put these on." Asato and Iora didn't argue. Each took a piece and tied it around their mouths, then followed Asato's lead as he resumed moving forward. After walking another minute or so through the winding tunnel, the path finally came to an end. Emerging from the passage, they found themselves in a wide underground chamber. Dust swirled thickly in the air. Hanging from ropes across the ceiling like slabs of smoked meat were the corpses of several Demon Slayer Corps members and some ordinary civilians. And beneath this grotesque forest of flesh, a small figure child-sized stood, gazing up at the hanging bodies. The child wore a dark brown kimono, had bare feet, and short hair that barely reached his ears. Perhaps having heard them approach, he turned to face the entrance. The moment he turned around, the three immediately confirmed his identity. The child's face appeared human at first glance, but protruding from his forehead was a twisted horn growing straight out from between his brows. His eyes were even more telling. His sclera were entirely black. It was the unmistakable hallmark of a demon. Most demons bore similar features. There was no doubt about it, this child was not human. He was a demon. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 56, 56, that's not the real body. Good, it's not lower rank 6 of the 12 Kizuki. Yoshizuru Asato's voice echoed through the empty chamber. He sounded relieved. Takeo also scrutinized the demon child's eyes, feeling slightly reassured. They say the 12 Kizuki bear a distinctive mark in their eyes, a character denoting their rank. For example, a lower rank 6 demon would have, lower rank 6, inscribed in its eyes. Thus, if there are no characters or numbers, the demon is not part of the 12 Kizuki. But Asato seemed to relax prematurely. The moment his words fell, the demon child cocked its head and anger flared across its face. So, you look down on me too, huh? As he spoke, he breathed out visible mist through his mouth, mist that began to spread throughout the chamber. Takeo's eyes widened slightly and he quickly snuffed out the torch in Asato's hand, putting it away safely. All three of them had trained to see in the dark, so the absence of such a faint light source wouldn't affect them much. But if that demon expanded the range of the dust cloud, and it came into contact with open flame, it could easily trigger a dust explosion. Even if Takeo had long forgotten most of what he'd been taught in school, this piece of knowledge had stuck with him. Dust explosions were extremely dangerous. If one really occurred here, the demon might be killed, but they would almost certainly die along with it. Granted, there was no proof that the dust this childlike demon exhaled was even flammable. But Takeo had no intention of gambling his life on a maybe. Takeo's swift move left both Asato and Iora momentarily stunned, but they didn't question him. As the demon child showed signs of preparing to attack, the two of them immediately dropped into a combat stance, weapons raised and eyes locked on the enemy. "Are you the only demon here?" Asato asked calmly. Apparently, something in that question struck a nerve. The moment Asato finished speaking, the demon boy roared in fury, "You're just like the rest, looking down on me. Looking down on someone who's about to become one of the 12 Kizuki." As the demon child shouted, the dust in the air surged, instantly flooding the entire chamber. Their vision was completely obstructed. Without the improvised masks made from Takeo's Haori, even their breathing would have been seriously hindered. The swirling cloud of dust seemed to gather into strange, shifting shapes. All three of them felt a strange gust of air surge toward them. As relatively skilled members of the Demon Slayer Corps, they instinctively dodged in their own ways before the wind reached them. When they turned back to look, they saw that part of the dust cloud had solidified into something and it had slammed violently into the wall of the cavern. This demon could condense dust into a physical form. The same thought flashed through all three of their minds. Suddenly, Takeo's brow twitched. His heightened senses slowly returning thanks to his growing supernatural abilities sent off a clear warning. Sensing imminent danger, he shouted to the others, "Watch out." But the warning came just a moment too late. Among the three, it was Asato whose ankle was suddenly seized by something. In the next instant, his body lost balance completely. He was yanked off the ground and dragged into the thick cloud of dust. And then bang! Gah! A heavy crashing sound rang out, followed by Asato's muffled cry of pain. He'd been slammed into the cavern wall. "That's what you get for looking down on me." The voice of the demon controlling the dust echoed from within the haze. Having locked onto the source of the sound, Takeo's eyes flashed with focus. He lowered his body and vanished from where he stood in an instant. Within the dense cloud, thinner wisps of mist weaved through the dust like threads. Takeo's figure moved like a starving wolf hidden in the fog, tracking his prey for the perfect, lethal strike. Wolf breathing, fourth form, wolf strike through the mist. A flash of silvery light cut through the dust-filled air, and under the arc of Takeo's blade, the demon's head soared high into the air. The resistance he felt in his arms startled him for a moment, but when he saw the demon's severed head fall, he relaxed slightly. With his current strength, using total concentration breathing in conjunction with his self-developed breathing style, Takeo could typically decapitate most demons without difficulty. But this time, there had been resistance. If his swing had been even slightly weaker, his blade might have gotten stuck in the demon's neck. Despite the demon's childlike appearance, its physical toughness surpassed that of any demon Takeo had encountered before. And thinking back to what the dust demon had shouted earlier about being qualified to join the 12 Kizuki, it all made sense. This demon wasn't even a 12 Kizuki yet, and it was already this difficult to behead. Just how powerful were the actual 12? Still, at least the demon's head had been cut off. That thought had barely formed when Takeo's pupils shrank to pinpricks. His body moved before his mind caught up, launching him into the air in a powerful leap. The moment he left the ground, a massive hand made of compacted dust swept across where he had just been standing. It was easy to imagine if Takeo hadn't leapt away in time, that massive dust-formed hand would have grabbed hold of him, and he would have ended up just like Asato, slammed into the wall. What? Sakuma Iori, whose sharp eyes had witnessed the entire exchange, had clearly seen Takeo decapitate the dust demon, and yet the demon immediately launched another attack. Her shocked voice rang out as she looked toward the severed head on the ground. Takeo! That's not the real body. Takeo snapped his head around. Sure enough, the demon's severed head was now crumbling into particles, disintegrating into the dust and seamlessly blending into the thick fog that filled the cavern. It wasn't the main body. It was a clone. A demon that could create clones. There was no time to think about where the real demon might be. Still midair from his earlier leap, Takeo suddenly found himself facing the next attack from the true dust demon, coming fast and without mercy. This next attack resembled the dust whip that had taken down Asato, only now, there were more of them. Countless tendrils of dense dust surged toward Takeo from all directions. And Takeo was still midair, nowhere to land, nowhere to dodge. Do I take the hit? The thought barely crossed his mind when, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimmer of light, a flash of water. Water breathing, fourth form Iora leapt from the ground, her Nichiren sword slashing through the air. The gleaming arcs of water flowed from her blade like crashing waves, striking the dust whips in succession. One strike. 2. 3. Each wave shattered another dust tendril. Striking tide. It seemed her training had paid off. She could now execute multiple forms of water breathing, and had grown into a capable demon slayer in her own right. But what surprised Takeo even more was what came next. After breaking the attack, Iora shouted, "Takeo! The whips are coming from 6 meters directly behind you. Got it?" Iora's keen eyesight proved invaluable in this moment. From the trajectory of the dust whips, she'd pinpointed their origin and relayed the exact position of the demon to Takeo. As soon as he heard it, Takeo responded without hesitation. Landing firmly on the ground, he twisted his body, reversing his grip on his Nichiren blade. With blade pointed forward like an unstoppable arrow, he charged into the darkness toward the source of the attack. Wolf breathing, second form lone wolf's last stand. A full power thrust that sacrificed all defense for pure offense, his strongest piercing strike, meant to tear through a demon's throat with unstoppable force. But when the blade struck the enemy, there was no sensation of flesh being pierced. Instead, he felt a sharp jolt of resistance, an unnatural, grinding halt. Clang. The sound rang out clear and cold. Takeo's eyes widened as he looked up at what stood before him. Was a solid cave wall. A wall. No, that's not right. Takeo had nearly assumed that Iori had made a mistake, but in the next moment, he saw it. Something inside the rock was moving. It squirmed faintly within the surface of the stone and then vanished deeper into the wall. Takeo's eyes dropped to the tip of his Nichiren blade. There just barely was a faint smear of blood. Realization hit him instantly. The demon was inside the rock. That dust demon's true body was hiding within the cave wall itself. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 57, 57, Advantages of Good Eyesight. Takeo's relentless attacks seemed to have finally made the dust demon realize this opponent wasn't going to be easy. Instead of striking again immediately, the demon retreated deeper into the stone and began using the echoing acoustics of the cave to throw his voice from all directions. So this is how it is. You all are strong indeed. I suppose, you're worthy of my contempt. His voice was muffled, likely due to being buried within the cave wall, and try as he might, Takeo couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. He glanced back toward Sakuma Iori. She had just finished helping Yoshizuru Asato back to his feet and now looked at Takeo, shaking her head slightly. Even with her sharp eyes, the cave's dim lighting and swirling dust were too much. She couldn't see where the demon was hiding. Takeo's expression grew serious. This was the first time in this mission that he truly felt how dangerous this demon was. But then, a thought sparked in his mind. He remembered how the demon had reacted with rage earlier, when Asato had dismissed him. The corner of Takeo's mouth curved upward. Feigning contempt, he raised his voice mockingly, "Oh, really? I don't see what's so special about you. If you hadn't hidden yourself so fast, you'd already be dead. Shut up." The demon's furious roar echoed violently through the cave. Takeo's taunt worked exactly as planned. The dust demon couldn't stand being mocked. Enraged, it immediately manipulated the swirling dust again, launching another attack, this time clearly aimed at killing the one who dared look down on him. But just as the assault began, Iori's voice rang out sharply, "Upper left, ahead. Wolf breathing, third form, wolf hunt." Takeo's Nichiren blade lashed out in a flurry of strikes, all directed at the point Iori had indicated. This time, his attacks hit true. A sharp, shrill scream tore from the walls, "Ah!" The howl of pain was quickly swallowed by the cave, but the blood seeping from the rock said everything they'd wounded him. Unfortunately, Takeo hadn't been able to determine where the demon's head was. He had gone for a wide area strike instead, and the force of the attack had been spread out. It wasn't enough to deal a fatal blow. And with the demon's infamous regenerative speed, it wouldn't be long before the dust demon recovered. "Damn you," the demon howled again, his voice filled with fury. The childlike, high-pitched voice echoed through the dark cave, sounding unnervingly eerie in the oppressive silence. Despite his furious curse, the dust demon didn't launch another attack. Instead, his presence faded, vanishing completely from view. It was impossible to tell where he had gone. Takeo stood tense, his eyes scanning the surroundings with heightened vigilance. Just then, Yoshizuru Asato, having recovered somewhat, walked over and said gravely, "Ha! Ha! Unless we find the real body, none of us can actually defeat him." The dust demon was a serious problem. Not only could he manipulate dust to suppress their breathing techniques, but he could also create clones from the dust and, worst of all, he could fuse into the cave walls to evade attacks entirely. Of those three abilities, the last one was the most troublesome. If the demon slipped into the stone, then unless Takeo could come up with a way to slice through both the wall and the demon in one strike, he'd have no choice but to let the enemy escape. And even if he did sever the demon's head, how would he know it wasn't just another clone? Just as Asato said, until they found the real body, no one could kill him. Asato steadied his breathing, scanning the swirling dust and the jagged stone, preparing to provoke the demon again with another taunt. But before he could speak, Iori suddenly pointed upward at a dark shape clinging to the wall. "Wait, look. That person, he's still alive," she shouted. "Eh." Both Takeo and Asato were startled by Iori's sudden exclamation. They followed her pointing finger upward, but they couldn't immediately identify who she was talking about. There were simply too many bodies hanging above them. Seeing their confusion, Iori pointed again and clarified, "That one, near the edge, his chest is still moving. He's breathing. You can tell that from this far away." Asato stared at her in disbelief. Earlier, Takeo had mentioned Iori had excellent eyesight. At the time, Asato hadn't thought much of it, but now he finally understood what Takeo meant. "The demon doesn't seem to be here anymore," Takeo said cautiously, eyes sweeping the surroundings. He couldn't sense the dust demon's presence anywhere nearby. It seemed the demon had realized how troublesome they were to deal with and temporarily retreated. "There's no way he'll give up on all these bodies," Asato said with a grim tone. "He probably can't absorb so many all at once. That's why he's been stockpiling them here. In other words, this place is his nest. He'll definitely come back. But before that, he continued, we need to get the survivor to the surface. Asato looked up at the demon slayers hanging from the ceiling. After a brief moment of thought, he leapt into the air and slashed at the ropes suspending them. Several bodies dropped to the ground. Asato caught the one Iori had pointed out and quickly checked him. There was still warmth, and a heartbeat. He was definitely alive. Damn you! What did you do to my food? The dust demon's furious roar rang out just as Asato had finished lowering the last of the bodies. Swoosh! At the same time, a massive cloud of dust came surging toward them from the direction of the tunnel entrance like a storming sand dragon. Asato had just landed and was holding the injured demon slayer in his arms. He couldn't respond in time. But Takeo and Iora moved in perfect sync, stepping forward to shield him. Each of them unleashed their respective breathing techniques, scattering the incoming dust wave. You go first. You go first, senpai. Their voices rang out nearly in unison. Asato was taken aback. Holding the severely wounded comrade in his arms, he shouted back, I'm an upper-rank corps member. You two are just Mizunoto. If anyone's leaving, it should be you. Quit talking nonsense. I can smell the demon, and Iora can track its movements. What can you even do by staying here? Takeo didn't mince words as he barked at Yoshizuru Asato. Even though the air was thick with dust and his face was partially covered, making it harder to catch the demon's scent, Takeo's skills spoke for themselves. Of the three, he was the only one capable of decapitating the dust demon in a head-on clash. Iora's combat strength might have been close to Asato's, but she had the advantage of sharp eyesight, able to spot things Takeo might miss. If the demon tried to run, she'd be the first to catch its trail. Only Asato lacked a unique edge. His presence in battle wouldn't tip the scales much. Better to serve as transport, get the wounded out safely. You brats! I'll remember this. Just wait till I get back. You two are not allowed to die. Be safe. Unable to argue, Asato shouted furiously at the two of them. Still, he didn't hesitate, turning and dashing off with the injured comrade in his arms. You're not going anywhere. Seeing one of its precious meals being carried away, the dust demon lost it completely. Much like a child unable to regulate its emotions, the demon had remained in a perpetual state of fury since the start. Now, enraged beyond reason, it emerged from the walls, its body darting through the rock like a shadow, headed straight for the fleeing Asato. But that single movement was all Iora needed to catch the demon's trace along the wall. Takeo. Left front wall. Left now, left rear. It's moving too fast. Iora shouted 3 directions in quick succession. Each one was accurate, but because the dust demon was moving at such high speed, her updates came rapidly to keep up. Takeo heard her report and made his decision in the span of a breath. Wolf breathing, second form, lone wolf's last stand. Activating second form, his body flashed across the space like a phantom, appearing instantly at the farther section of the left wall. Swoosh. Without pause, he shifted to third form wolf breathing, third form, wolf hunt. A barrage of relentless strikes rained down like a violent storm, each blow hammering the stone wall with pinpoint precision. Ayah! A gut-wrenching scream tore from the wall. He'd hit the demon again, and this time it was in real pain. Underscore support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 58, The Split. The dust demon, once again injured, vanished back into the wall. This troublesome technique of practically merging with the wall was giving Takeo a real headache. He swung his blade and slashed at the wall a few more times, but after hitting nothing, he finally gave up. Not much strength, but sure knows how to hide. Now that he had figured out the dust demon's nature, Takeo sneered at it with scorn. But this time, Whether it was out of fear of Takeo's strength or for some other reason, the dust demon didn't respond at all. Frowning slightly, Takeo turned to look at Sakuma Iori. Iori shook her head at him, indicating that she hadn't found any trace of the dust demon yet. Seeing this, Takeo looked again in the direction where Yoshizuru Asato had fled. After such a delay, there was no telling how far Asato had gotten. But if the dust demon could keep moving at this speed through the walls, it might not be long before he caught up to him. Fortunately, the dust demon didn't seem to be pursuing Yoshizuru Asato anymore. After a long silence, the dust demon suddenly burst out laughing triumphantly. Ha ha, ha 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 ha, you're stronger than the ones who came yesterday, but even so, it's useless if you can't find me. This cave, this entire underground area, was built by me. As long as I'm here, I'm invincible. None of you can kill me. You sure talk big. If you're really that powerful, then why aren't you one of the 12 Kazuki yet? Takeo continued to mock him, while exchanging glances with Sakuma Iori. Iori quickly caught on to what Takeo meant. As Takeo spoke with the dust demon, her eyes stayed fixed on the rock wall, carefully searching for any sign of the demon. The dust demon was small in stature and seemed mentally immature. With just a few words, Takeo had already provoked him into a rage. If it weren't for my bad luck? If it weren't for the fact that I can't eat any more right now? I'd already be one of the 12 Kazuki. All of you would have died here. Oh, so you're saying you're just not good enough? Understandable. Takeo replied in a calm tone. But it was precisely that calmness that made it all the more infuriating. But this time, the dust demon didn't respond with angry shouting. Instead, his voice grew low and heavy as he spoke. I've decided. I'm going to let you live, and then I'll eat you piece by piece right in front of your loved one's eyes. I'll make you regret saying those things to me. Tisk tisk, big mouth for someone without the strength to back it up. Sure, come at me. I'm standing right here, go ahead, I'm waiting. Takeo's mocking tone and expression were completely unrestrained, almost exaggerated. Yet the dust demon still didn't show himself. This guy might have seemed aggressive and arrogant on the surface, but deep down, he was clearly a coward. Takeo. He ran. Not long after Takeo's taunt, Iori suddenly shouted to him. And that confirmed Takeo's suspicion about the cowardly demon. All that anger from before had just been bluster and bravado. Once he realized that Takeo had the strength to kill him, he didn't even bother to show his face. After throwing out a few harsh words, he simply turned and fled. Takeo looked once again in the direction Yoshizuru Asato had escaped and asked Iori, which way did he run? That way. Iori pointed toward one of the passageways deeper inside the cave. It was in the exact opposite direction from where Asato had fled. Why that way? The doubt flashed briefly through Takeo's mind, but he didn't dwell on it. He and Iori moved together in that direction. On the way, while there was still time, Takeo voiced his question to Iori, how did you spot him? Color, Iori replied. The color of the rock walls is mostly the same, but when that demon passed by, the area looked slightly lighter, kind of like the difference between stone and dust. To me, it was obvious. Color? Takeo glanced instinctively at the rock wall beside him. To him, there didn't seem to be any visible difference in color on the surface of the wall. Oh, right, it must be that thing what those clickbait posts used to talk about, some sort of innate talent related to color perception. Takeo recalled reading something in his past life on one of those clickbait marketing accounts. They said some people are naturally able to distinguish far more colors than others, thousands, even tens of thousands of shades. Maybe Iori was one of those people. That would explain why she was always able to spot things others couldn't. As Takeo pondered this, he heard Iori speak again. Also, I suspect that demon was lying when he said he created this entire cave himself. Hmm. Why do you think that? Because the color of the rock walls where Senior Asato escaped is different from the ones in the main chamber. And that dust demon, it seems like he can only phase through the walls in the main chamber and the ones around here. Iora shared the key detail she had observed. She hadn't been completely sure before, but now that she saw the dust demon hadn't fled in any other direction and had specifically chosen this path to escape, she felt confident in her deduction. The dust demon had indeed constructed an underground maze, but that maze hadn't been built from scratch by him. Most of the cave system likely already existed. The dust demon had simply modified it for his own use, embedding his blood demon art into it, allowing him to move freely within. But he could only travel through areas he had modified. In places untouched by his alterations, he was powerless. So that means, his real lair is actually this way. Seeing that he and Iora were heading deeper and deeper into the cave, Takeo asked her. That, I don't know. Iora answered instinctively, then suddenly came to a stop. What is it? Seeing her stop, Takeo had no choice but to stop as well. He looked at her in confusion, only to see Iora's brows tightly furrowed as she looked back and forth down the path ahead. After a long pause, she said, "It split." "What?" "Up ahead, at the fork his trail split. There are traces of him on both sides." Iora pointed forward as she spoke. Ahead of them were two passageways leading in different directions, one to the left and one to the right. In Iora's eyes, the dust demon's trail appeared on both paths, and she couldn't immediately tell which one he had actually taken. "Let's pick one side to investigate first." Takeo made the call. He looked toward the cave on the left, intending to start there. But Iori had a different opinion. "No, we can't. What if he escaped through the other side? So you're suggesting we split up?" Takeo's eyes were filled with disapproval. "That's too dangerous. Takeo, are you underestimating me? I've already mastered 9 forms of water breathing 9. I might not be able to beat that demon, but I can definitely spot him and hold him off for a while." Iora patted her chest proudly. Since returning, spurred on by Takeo's example, she had put serious effort into her training. And she had actually managed to master every form of water breathing except the 10th form in a short amount of time. Her strength was now worlds apart from what it had been before. That much had already been evident when the two of them fought off the dust demon's attacks together earlier. Takeo knew Iora's strength had improved quite a bit compared to before, but even so, he still couldn't feel at ease. He opened his mouth slightly, about to object, but Iora wasn't in the mood to keep arguing. She pushed him forward, shoving him toward one of the tunnel entrances, and said, all right, just trust me. Besides, I'm not that unlucky. It's not like I'll actually run into that demon. What if you do? If I do, I'll do everything I can to hold him off until you get there," Iora declared with absolute confidence. She patted her chest and straightened her back, head held high as she said, "Anyway, just trust me. I won't let that demon get away." She promised him with such determination. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, chapter 59, another scar on her face just as Iori had said. If the dust demon had truly only escaped in one direction, then the path Iori chose might not actually be the one the demon took. In that case, it would likely be Takeo who encountered the demon, and if so, there would be no need for him to worry about Iora's safety. On the other hand, if Iora were the one to run into the demon, then with her current strength, she should still be able to hold him off. If they both took the same path, the demon could emerge from the other path and go after the running Asato carrying the injured, or flee the mountain to settle elsewhere, killing more people and becoming stronger. What Takeo needed to do now was trust his teammate. Demon hunting was not always something that could be done alone. That's why the role of a comrade was so important, especially in situations like this. At this moment, aside from trusting Iori, Takeo didn't seem to have any other choice. Alright, but if you end up running into that demon first, make sure you shout as loud as you can. I'll come as fast as possible. Takeo gave her one last reminder, then slipped into the tunnel on one side. He moved swiftly. He had to make sure that as long as he hadn't found the dust demon, he could still return quickly to back up Iori. That way, even if she did encounter the demon, she wouldn't need to hold him off for long. Unfortunately, up to now, Takeo still hadn't gained 2B's recognition. If he had access to overclocking, his speed would no doubt be even faster. As Takeo disappeared down one tunnel, Iori watched him go before taking a deep breath and heading toward the other entrance. What she hadn't told Takeo was that, she was actually a little scared. After all, that demon was powerful enough to potentially become one of the 12 Kazuki. A demon of that level really shouldn't be something they were dealing with at all. But just as Asato had said, the Demon Slayer Corps existed to kill demons. Once you joined, your personal life came second, hunting demons always came first. Maybe not everyone believed that. But Asato did. And Iori. Actually, she did too. She had never told anyone about her past, not even Takeo. And she probably wouldn't tell anyone in the future either. She would bury the hatred she held for demons deep in her heart and continue to smile and act goofy in front of others. Maybe it was because of the fear and tension that her mind began to wander. But soon, she pulled herself back together. At the same time, she tried to reassure herself. It wasn't guaranteed she'd run into the dust demon, right? Surely, she wouldn't be that unlucky. As that thought crossed Iori's mind, she suddenly recalled everything that had happened to her since she first came out for the final selection and started feeling less certain. Running into the bandage demon right after leaving home, encountering the hand demon during the exam, her luck had honestly been downright abysmal. If her luck was still that bad, then this time TCH. I didn't expect you to be the one who caught up. That guy's not with you, and you still dared to come after me alone. Just as Iori reached the end of the tunnel, she heard the dust demon's voice. She immediately smiled, but it was the kind of smile that looked just about ready to fall apart into tears. As expected. She really shouldn't have trusted her luck. Takeo was sprinting through the winding tunnel. His speed was impressive, but eventually, he had no choice but to slow down. Another fork had appeared in front of him. Staring at the forked paths on either side, Takeo decisively yanked off the cloth mask he'd been using to block out the dust. Ignoring the fine particles floating in the air, he took a deep breath. Then, without hesitation, he advanced toward the direction where the scent of dust was strongest. Inhaling that dust into his lungs wasn't exactly pleasant, but fortunately, Takeo's recovery ability was strong. The discomfort quickly disappeared with a single cough. For someone like Uncle Logan, who could survive even when buried at the bottom of the ocean, thin or polluted air was certainly unpleasant, but still within bearable limits. The same applied to Takeo. And so, after adjusting to the current environment, Takeo picked up his pace. The dust demon's scent was even stronger than expected. Now that he'd acclimated, Takeo might not even need Iori to track the demon's location. If he could confirm that the dust demon was indeed down this path, this extermination mission could come to an end. Assuming the one he encountered was the real body. There you are. After advancing through the tunnel for a while longer, Takeo finally spotted the dust demon's fleeing figure ahead of him. He didn't have time to determine whether what was in front of him was a clone or the real body. The moment he laid eyes on the demon, total concentration breathing surged through his entire body. Swoosh! With a thrusting form of wolf breathing, Takeo instantly closed the distance between them. His blade pierced the demon's nape with perfect accuracy. The moment the blade entered flesh, he twisted without hesitation and yanked it hard to the side. With a faint gust of wind, the dust demon's head was once again sent flying. But there was no joy in Takeo's heart, no sense of having slain the demon, because the head quickly crumbled into dust, along with the body. It was a clone. Realizing this, Takeo took a deep breath. He looked up at the tunnel that had come to a dead end ahead, then turned around without a moment's hesitation. If this one was just a clone, then on Iora's side, it was highly likely she was facing the real body. It is the real one. Just as Iora's blade finally reached the dust demon's neck and swiftly sliced through it, she instantly knew the demon in front of her was the real one. As for why? Because she couldn't cut through it. It wasn't that the dust demon's neck was physically uncuttable, but rather, a layer of compacted dust had formed a protective shell around it. That layer had fused with his flesh, as if it had grown directly from his body. Iora wasn't sure if the clones had the same kind of protection around their necks. But what she was certain of was that with her current strength, even if a clone had that kind of defense, she would still be able to cut through it. The fact that she couldn't now meant only one thing: this was the real body. Even with a 50/50th chance, her bad luck had hit the worst outcome. Her luck really was the worst. Die. Before Iora could even finish mentally cursing her fate, the dust demon launched his attack. The swirling dust condensed into countless invisible whips. They lashed out in a dense storm from all directions, converging on Iora at the center. Twisting her body, Iora quickly pulled back out of the dust demon's range. As gleaming water light erupted around her, she spun, and her Nichiren sword followed her motion, striking with precision against the incoming dust whips. Water-breathing, sixth form, whirlpool. The swirling vortex blocked nearly all of the attacks aimed at Iora. However, in the end, not every dust whip was deflected. Ugh. 2 of them struck her body, but that didn't matter. They hadn't hit any vital spots. But one of the whips grazed the side of her cheek. It wasn't a fatal hit, just another wound on her face. And yet, for Iora, that single strike was the most critical, and the most dangerous. Because the scarf she'd wrapped around her face to block the dust was knocked off by that blow. It fell to the ground and was quickly buried under layers of dust. Her mouth and nose were now fully exposed to the air. The thick dust suspended in the air surged into her nasal passages.